Chapter 421. Yin Nuoxing watched the golden dragon disappear with empty eyes. He turned his head and looked at the 9 sacred mountains of the Death Mountain range. At this moment, the abyss dark sword that had unleashed the shocking strike had already returned to the center of the sacred mountains and was nowhere to be seen. In the sky, the dust that filled the sky had already settled. The abyss below was so huge that it made everyone's heart jump. With such a scale, other than the Death Mountain range, the rest of the ghost forest had turned into an abyss. Furthermore, the restrictive force here had disappeared. Only then did they remember that they couldn't fly here. With the disappearance of the golden dragon, the sky became calm again. The people from the Astral Pavilion and the 10,000 Source Hall didn't appear from the beginning to the end. In the end, it was the people from the 7 Stars Hall who came out to clean up the mess and rescue the people from the Chief family. Then, they escaped without a trace. Yin Nuoxing stood quietly in the sky and looked up at the sky. He didn't speak for a long time. Jin Jinwang also kept blocking Xian and didn't let her go over. Although the battle had ended, Yin Nuoxing's body was still surrounded by that frightening dark energy. No one knew if he would suddenly attack. Therefore, everyone kept a very far distance from him and just watched from afar. The 6 demonic wings trembled slightly and slowly retracted into his body under everyone's gaze. Yin Nuoxing sighed faintly and swept his gaze across everyone. Those who were swept by his gaze hurriedly avoided it and didn't even have the courage to look him in the eye. Even the Emperor of the Dead was scared away by his gaze. How could they look him in the eye? After looking around, his gaze finally landed on Jin Jinwang and Xian. Yin Nuoxing turned around and walked down from the sky step by step towards Jin Jinwang and the others. The actions of this malefic star had been observed by everyone. Once he moved, everyone quickly turned their gazes towards him. Jin Jinwang's expression was even uglier. What he saw was still that pair of black eyes without any emotion. They were still looking straight at them and walking toward them step by step. If he didn't know that the golden bell bottle couldn't threaten him, he would have taken it out long ago. Xian, who was protected behind Jin Jinwang, was also shocked. This wasn't the first time she saw Yin Nuoxing like this. However, after seeing his true strength, she couldn't help but feel a little afraid. Moreover, it was just as the former said, Yin Nuoxing now wasn't the Yin Nuoxing they knew. It wasn't until Yin Nuoxing stood in front of Jin Jinwang and the others that everyone watched this scene nervously. They didn't know what this guy wanted to do. A white arm slid out of his sleeve. Yin Nuoxing raised his hand, and a talisman slowly rose from his palm. After this talisman appeared, the space around him suddenly lit up with a black light. Several magic arrays rotated silently and enveloped Jin Jinwang and Xian. Seeing his actions, Jin Jinwang panicked. He was about to take Xian and run away when he felt that there was no murderous intent in this dark space. On the contrary, the power seemed very peaceful. The two of them were stunned, especially Jin Jinwang. He recognized that there was also the power of space. The black talisman shone brightly. After a moment, Yin Nuoxing gently clenched his hand. The space around him suddenly shrank together with the spinning magic arrays. In just a few breaths of time, the shrank space and magic arrays flashed, and the place returned to its original state. However, the figures of the 3 people were nowhere to be seen. He's gone? Seeing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. This fiend had left so unexpectedly. They didn't expect this. Just seeing him made it difficult for them to breathe. This battle had left an unusually deep impression on them. Outside the ghastly forest, the vast plains were filled with solidified magma. Cracks that were hundreds of meters wide extended all the way, and one could still vaguely see a little bit of green grass. More than that, it was black from the solidified magma. Desolation was the main theme of this place. At a certain moment, there was a fluctuation in the space. Then, the space suddenly lit up with a dark light. A dark space and magic array rapidly expanded. In just a breath's time, it had completely expanded. Then, 3 figures appeared from within and floated in the sky. Little star, are you all right? In the blink of an eye, the people around them had disappeared. Xian saw Yin Nuoxing's pale face and hurriedly asked. Yin Nuoxing was stunned, but his eyes were already closed. The dark aura hovering around his body had completely disappeared. When he heard the cry, his body swayed a few times. Then, he fell forward. Xian saw this and hurriedly supported Yin Nuoxing. What her lily-white hands touched was an ice-cold body without any warmth. She was shocked. However, before she could say anything, Jin Jinwang grabbed Yin Nuoxing's wrist. A moment later, his expression changed drastically. He couldn't help but mutter, "This is terrible, Senior Divine King, Little Star." Xian's face paled when she heard this. She hurriedly asked. The meridians in his body were originally broken into several sections. Although they've been reconnected, his body was already weak to begin with. He forcefully used that dark energy from an unknown source. This body couldn't take it anymore. Now, even his life force. Jin Wang frowned. Life force. Xian's body trembled when she heard Jin Wang's words. Her face paled even more. Life force was the basis of a person's life. If a person didn't even have life force, then it was the end of their life. Let's go. Let's find Muing first. She might have a way. Jin Wang gritted his teeth. With a wave of his hand, a golden light enveloped the three of them. They hurriedly rushed into the distance. Within the golden light, Xian hugged Yin Nuoxing tightly. Her lily-white hands held his ice-cold hands. Bits of life force flowed out of her palms and slowly entered his body. It was far slower than the last time when their mouths met. She sighed softly and pressed her face against his. She couldn't help but mutter, "Little Star, please be safe." Jin Wang quickly found Lei Tian and the others using the Nine Gods Temple's unique communication method. When everyone saw the three of them return, they were stunned. Then, when they couldn't sense Yin Nuoxing's aura, the expressions of the Divine Kings changed drastically. The beautiful woman even waved her lily-white hands and slapped away the hindrance, Jin Wang. She placed her lily-white hands on Yin Nuoxing's lifeline. Do your best, littling. Little Star's life is in your hands. After being slapped away, Jin Wang crawled back to Yin Nuoxing's side. He couldn't help but say when he saw the serious expression on the beautiful woman's face. Shut up. The beautiful woman was enraged when Jin Wang called her by her nickname. She couldn't help but slap him again. Then, she took a deep breath and nodded slightly. Her beautiful face gradually calmed down. She placed her hand on Yin Nuoxing's pulse and carefully checked the condition of her body. The unique life force of the wood element slowly spread from her body, filling the air with life force. Seeing the beautiful woman examining with rapt attention, no one dared to disturb her. Lei Tian and Hua Zhu glanced at each other and spread out, guarding against the situation around them. The Water God King's hands danced like lightning. Arrays flew out from her palms, and thousands of energy arrays flooded the area. The group of juniors looked around, not knowing what to do. A quiet and tense atmosphere lingered in the area. After a long time, the beautiful woman gently opened her eyes. She breathed a sigh of relief and said softly, "Fortunately, he's not completely dead." Hearing this, Xian and the others suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. The former's delicate body collapsed. The tense atmosphere just now had made her mind extremely tense. "There's hope?" Lei Tian and the others asked with joy. The beautiful woman nodded and said, "Little Star has a strange power in his body that helped him hang on to his last breath. There's a weak life force remaining in his body. Xian has been constantly supplying him with life force. In addition, Little Star is in his body. As long as there's a little bit of life force, he can be reborn." Maybe in a while, before the beautiful woman's voice fell, Yin Nuoxing's body suddenly lit up with a gorgeous crimson-pink light. Faint purple and crimson-pink flames spread out from his body. Xian was shocked and slowly placed his body on the ground. The flames churned. At this moment, everyone seemed to see the figure of a phoenix spreading its wings. Two kinds of flames surged out from his body. Suddenly, many threads of two colors appeared on the surface of his body. They slowly formed a cocoon around Yin Nuoxing's body and slowly closed. A rich crimson-pink light surged out from his body. Finally, it turned into a wide, purplish-red cocoon of light that wrapped around his body. Seeing this, everyone was startled and then breathed a sigh of relief. They knew that Yin Nuoxing had used up all his energy and was about to die. He was most likely going to be reborn, just like a phoenix reborn from the ashes. I forgot that this brat had an ancient technique like heaven's emergence. Several divine kings breathed a sigh of relief. Phoenix's nirvana. Maybe this brat will use the power of rebirth to break through in one go. Speaking of which, he seems to have stayed in Immortal 3 for some time. Huizhu scratched his head and couldn't help but laugh. The beautiful woman smiled and nodded. Her mood finally relaxed a little. This time, it would be difficult for Yin Nuoxing to die even if he wanted to. Then, Yuan Shi and the others on the side finally breathed a sigh of relief when they heard the two's words. Now, let's go back to the temple and find a place with sufficient energy. Yin Nuoxing will be better nourished. Once Yin Nuoxing's problem was solved, the tense atmosphere immediately relaxed. Jin Wang stood up, looked around, and then smiled. Huizhu nodded, but he was stunned for a moment. Then, he turned his gaze to Xian and Yuan Shi. Xian and Yuan Shi were stunned when they received this gaze. They looked at each other, and after a moment, they finally understood. The former smiled and said, "Bring Little Star over." Hearing this, Jin Wang laughed evilly. He had always wanted to trick Yin Nuoxing into entering the Nine Deities Temple. However, this brat was too resistant at the beginning, and later on, he didn't have the time. Now that he was unconscious and couldn't resist, he could forcefully drag him into the temple. It could be said that his wish had been fulfilled. Thinking of this, Jin Wang couldn't help but grin. When the Divine Kings saw this, they all rolled their eyes. Everyone knew what he was thinking. If it wasn't for the fact that Yin Nuoxing was half dead this time, he would definitely say, "You guys can go back. I'll just find a place to sleep." Ahem. Then, there is no time to lose. Old Shui, hurry up and open the gate. Let's go back. Jin Wang coughed heavily. He flicked his hair and said excitedly to the Water God King with an evil smile, "Damn it. Let's see how Little Star will beat you to death when he wakes up." Seeing his annoying smile, several divine kings felt embarrassed. They couldn't help raising their feet to kick him. The Water God King coughed. The array he had just arranged was arranged in order. Then, the array in front of them slowly cracked and expanded rapidly. Inside, there was a scene. They tidied up and stepped into the gate one after another. However, Mo Yinhua and Xian Ning didn't go in. Seeing that they were leaving, they said goodbye and separated. Xian and Yuan Shi watched them leave. Then, they pushed the huge cocoon transformed by Yin Nuoxing and stepped into the gate. Chapter 422. The 9 elemental temples were located in the 4 regions of the Divine Prefecture. They formed a circle around the small Divine Prefecture. Among many famous forces, there were very few disciples in the 9 elemental temples. Of course, although they were not good in quantity, they were still very successful in quality. Every disciple of the 9 elemental temples had good cultivation talent. The elders of the 9 elemental temples were also well known in the Divine Prefecture. Therefore, many people knew that if they saw a disciple of the 9 elemental temples outside, they must not be fooled by their appearance. The 9 elemental temples were always unexpected. In the Divine Prefecture, the 9 elemental temples were very mysterious. Other forces that had established their own sects and schools did a very good job of keeping up appearances. They were magnificent, and ancient. At first glance, people would think that this sect or school was very powerful. However, there was not even a shadow of the 9 elemental temples. Even those who were more familiar with the 9 elemental temples only knew where they were located in the Divine Prefecture. This made the 9 elemental temples more mysterious in the eyes of others. The ghost forest of the Taiyuan domain was very far away from the northern wilderness. It was difficult to measure the distance with specific numbers. Ordinary practitioners might not be able to reach it even if they walked for thousands of years. Fortunately, The people of the Water God Temple were proficient in magic formations. This was also the method that the disciples of the Water God Temple must know. In order to enter the Water God Temple, one must know how to weave their own magic formations in addition to the purest water elements. At this time, Jin Wang and the others drove straight into the northern wilderness with the help of the Water God King's transmitting magic formation. Then, they carefully arranged several small transmissions and hurried on their way. It took them a total of 4 or 5 days to complete the long journey outside a huge oasis in the northern wilderness called the Water Flame Mountain Range. We've arrived at the Water Flame Mountain Range. This is where the Water God Temple and the Fire God Temple are located. Although we've arrived at the door, if you're not one of us, you still can't enter the house. This is the same even for gods and experts of the rebirth state. Seeing the mountain range full of red trees, Jin Wang stretched his body, turned his head, and smiled at Xian. If it's the Golden Divine Palace, it's in the western region, together with the Wind Divine Palace. In the southern region, it's the Wood Divine Palace and the Earth Divine Palace, while the Thunder Divine Palace and the Steel Divine Palace are in the Eastern Sea. However, when Old Shui sets up his formation, he's used to setting it at his own doorstep, so he came here first. Jin Wang said with a smile. When Yuanshi heard a place, he replied, yes. When the Gold God King finished, he was stunned for a moment before he asked curiously, what about the Light God Palace? Jin Wang was stunned. After rubbing his forehead for a while, he said, if it's the Light Shrine, actually the Light Shrine is in a world of its own, floating in the void. The entrance to the people of the Light Shrine, everywhere is an entrance. As for others, there's an 80% chance that they won't be able to enter. The Yuan Guang realm is the name of the world where the Light Shrine is located. It was created by the 9 ancestors of the Light Shrine. If there's no special way to enter, even experts of the rebirth state won't be able to enter. Afraid that Yuanshi wouldn't understand, Yao Hua explained. With that, Yuanshi nodded in understanding. This was a protective measure that every sect had. For example, his Yuan clan was located in the western region, but it was difficult to find. After all, there aren't many people with the light element. They're even more precious than our disciples. We have to put in some effort to protect them. Jin Wang covered his forehead and laughed bitterly. The God Kings shook their heads with bitter smiles as well. A while later, they turned around and waved at everyone, quickly flying into the mountains. Behind them, Xian and the others quickly followed. The group flew through the Red Mountains for close to half an hour before Hua Zhu slowly came to a stop. Behind her, Xian and Yao Hua were stunned. They looked around, but all they saw was a fire-red forest. There were no buildings, no auras of people. It was just an ordinary forest. The Light Shrine isn't here. Although the location is correct, in actuality, we're right below the Light Shrine. Jin Wang grinned as he pointed upwards. With that, Xian and Yuan, she both raised their heads. However, they couldn't see anything. Apart from white clouds, there was only blue sky. We'll be within the range of the Light Shrine's formations once we enter the Fire Shrine or Water Shrine. We won't be able to enter without the mark of the Fire Shrine or Water Shrine. Jin Wang smiled. A fire-red medallion appeared in his hand before flying out. Faint fire, elemental energy radiated from it as it shone brightly. The space above his head actually gradually twisted. In the end, under Xian and Yao Hua's shocked gazes, it turned into a space gate. A small space gate. After entering from here, we'll be at the headquarters of the Fire Shrine and Water Shrine. Jin Wang smiled and took the lead in floating through the gate. Behind him, the group of people from the Light Shrine followed. Xian and Yao Hua didn't stand on ceremony either. They took the cocoon and entered the gate. After everyone entered, the space gate dissipated into nothingness. After entering the space gate, Xian and Yao Hua only felt that the surrounding space and time were flowing at an abnormal speed. Suddenly, it was as fast as the speed of light, and suddenly, it was as slow as static. They didn't know how much time had passed. It seemed like a blink of an eye, but it also seemed like hundreds of days had passed. Above their heads, there was a change. The sky that was originally blue, like a whirlpool, had now turned into a blue sky. A huge floating island appeared in front of them. On the island, there was a mountain range and a towering mountain peak. The huge divine shrine stood in the center of the island. Around the divine shrine, some buildings could be seen faintly. They could even hear waves of shouting in the distance. We're above the clouds in the sky. The barrier around the entrance of the divine shrine and around the divine shrine has been strengthened and maintained by the previous temple masters. After so many years, it's still intact. It can disturb the surrounding space and time. Even if someone accidentally passes through the divine shrine, they won't be able to sense the strangeness of this space. After all, this barrier can be considered half a worldwide barrier. It's just that the main body is separated from the original space, Jin Wang said with a smile. Xian was also a little shocked when he heard this. He couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Yuanshi was also amazed. Compared to the protective measures of a Yuan family, the 9 shrines measures were much more sophisticated. Even a late god-level master might not be able to find this place. Not long after the group of people appeared in the sky, a dozen or so huge fire cranes suddenly flew out from the distant mountain peak. There were some figures standing on the fire cranes, and the leading fiery red figure quickly flashed over and appeared in front of everyone. The figure that appeared in front of everyone looked very young, no more than 20 years old. He wore a scarlet robe, and his refreshing fiery red short hair gently danced in the wind, giving him a sense of elegance. The red-clothed man's thin face was very delicate and handsome, with a masculine aura. The corners of his mouth were tightly pursed, and he was filled with dignity. Senior Divine King. Seeing that it was Jin Wang and the others, the red-clothed man heaved a sigh of relief. He turned his head and nodded, allowing the wild beasts that were hovering in the air to retreat first. Yes. Jin Wang nodded with a smile, then turned his head, pointed at the red-clothed man in front of him, and said to Xian and the other with a smile, "This is Hua Sheng, the godson of the fire god shrine. Don't be fooled by his face of a 10,000-year-old iceberg. He's actually a good person." Hearing this, Xian and the other was startled, and the man named Hua Sheng was even more embarrassed. He didn't expect that the Divine King would introduce him as soon as they met. The former and the other stuck their heads out and glanced at the man, while the latter also looked over with a strange expression. But this glance made him suddenly stunned. His eyes stared straight at Xian, unable to move away at all. The 10,000-year-old iceberg face showed rare signs of melting, and there was a sense of warmth after ice and snow, which surprised Jin Wang and the others. Inexplicably being stared at by a warm gaze, Xian was stunned. Seeing that Hua Sheng was staring at him, he was very embarrassed. He unnaturally shrank his body and hid behind the beautiful woman. Cough. Everyone coughed dryly and pulled Hua Sheng out of his state of forgetfulness. The latter paused and also realized that he had lost his composure. He laughed dryly and scratched the back of his head. "Go and call the great elder or the hall master out. Just say that there's something important to discuss." Jin Wang said, and then laughed bitterly. What the hell was this? That warm gaze just now really made people unable to adapt. Hua Sheng was stunned, and only after a long while did he come back to his senses. Looking at Jin Wang, he said carefully, "But the Divine King, Great Elder," and the others said, "If there's nothing important, don't disturb them. Isn't there something important? Just tell them that the Son of God's mandate is here." With such a roar, I think the hall masters of the 9 shrines will come. Jin Wang touched his chin and said. The last sentence was said in a very low voice, making it difficult for others to hear. "All right." Hua Sheng nodded with a bitter smile. He looked around slightly, inadvertently looking behind the beautiful woman, but he did not see Xian's figure. Then he looked at the 2-colored cocoon to the side and was stunned for a while. Son of God's mandate? He could not help but mutter inside. Basically, all the disciples of the 9 shrines had heard of this name before, but they did not know who it was. After thinking for a while, Hua Sheng shook his head and hurriedly flew towards the central shrine. Only when Huasheng rushed into the shrine did the divine kings turn their heads strangely. They glanced at the embarrassed Xian and looked at each other. After a while, they all laughed bitterly and waved their hands. Let's go first. We'll talk after we settle the little idiot down. If you don't want to go back, then just stay here and take care of that idiot. Oh, Yao Hua and the others all frowned when they heard that. They looked at each other and winked at each other for a while, communicating with each other as if they had a tacit understanding. Afterwards, they all nodded and chose to stay. Jin Jinwang led everyone to the very top of the shrine. The top floor was several hundred meters wide, and there was a crystal platform in the center. Above the crystal platform was a 30-meter wide hole. They could see the clear sky through the hole. Hundreds of huge stone pillars stood at the edge of the top floor of the shrine. The ground was engraved with numerous complex runes, as well as seemingly disorderly matrix lines. Those runes and marks were all drawn by the matrix lines and connected from the periphery to the crystal platform in the center. These matrix lines and runes could absorb all the energy within the shrine and converge to the crystal platform in the center. This was the place with the densest energy in the shrine. It gathered the elemental energy between heaven and earth, and the power of stars passed down from the star field. After listening to Jin Jinwang's explanation, Xian carefully placed Yun Nuoxing's cocoon on the crystal platform. At this moment, the light inside the huge cocoon flickered and pulsed like a beating heart. Every time the light was released, the surrounding energy would fluctuate. As soon as Yun Nuoxing's cocoon was placed on the crystal platform, the light inside the cocoon suddenly flourished. Then, under everyone's astonished gaze, many silk threads extended from the surface of the cocoon, covering the sky and covering the earth. Everyone took a small step back to avoid being entangled. The silk threads wrapped around the stone pillars at the edge of the cocoon before stopping. At the same time, rich starlight and elemental energy diffused from the crystal platform. Even the surrounding energy was attracted and gathered in a steady stream. The two flames intertwined and hovered on the surface of the cocoon. In an instant, everyone could clearly see a phoenix proudly raising its head and spreading its wings. However, this scene only lasted for a few seconds. They knew that this was a vision caused by the fire of the little phoenix. Seeing this scene, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The more vigorous the true phoenix fire burned, the faster Yun Nuoxing would recover. However, the true phoenix fire was not really subdued by Yun Nuoxing. It was just that the little phoenix was in her body, so she could use it temporarily. I can finally breathe a sigh of relief. However, the healing time shouldn't be too short. I don't know how long she will sleep. Jin Jinwang smiled and shook his head. Every time Yun Nuoxing was seriously injured and exhausted, she would need a year or so to recover. However, she could recover safely. No matter how long it took, it didn't matter. Chapter 423. Looking at the light cocoon rising from the flames, Jin Jinwang smiled faintly and was about to take his people out of the top floor to have a good rest. However, a strong shout made his body stiffen. Where's the little god? This old man has come out. Let me take a look. The moment the shout rang out, a figure flew up from the bottom of the divine hall. In the blink of an eye, he arrived at the top floor. Looking at the top of the divine hall that had become like a cave and the light cocoon on the crystal platform, he was stunned for a moment. His young face was quickly filled with astonishment. Great Elder. Seeing the first person, Jin Jinwang and the others were also startled. Huizhu gritted his teeth and walked forward, calling out softly. Hearing Huizhu's call, the great elder of the fire god shrine turned around and saw Jin Jinwang and the others here. He casually nodded and then quickly swept his gaze behind them. However, he didn't see Yun Nuoxing's figure. He couldn't help but wrinkle his fiery red eyebrows and said in a deep voice, Huizhu, where's the little god? Being directly asked by the great elder, Huizhu was speechless. A bitter smile appeared on his face. He opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything for a long time. He really didn't know what to say and didn't have time to care that his nickname was called out in front of the younger generation. puffed. When he heard Huazhu's nickname, Yao Hua was the first to burst out laughing. The others either covered their mouths or looked up at the sky with funny expressions. Jin Jinwang was called Little Stone, and the Fire God King was called Huazhu. Then, what were the Thunder God King and the others called? Huazhu fiercely turned his head and glared at Yao Hua. He smiled bitterly and said, "That little star." He swallowed hard and slowly pointed his finger at the center of the top floor. Then he nodded. "Oh, he's here." "Oh, Ascension? Is he seriously injured?" "Huazhu, you said that you would protect the little god. What? You actually injured him?" After seeing the cocoon of light, the great elder nodded. Then he suddenly felt that something was wrong. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the 8 people of Huazhu, causing them to have goosebumps. When the great elder was teaching the God Kings a lesson with his eyes, the space suddenly distorted. Then it gradually formed a simple spatial door. 2 figures slowly walked out of the spatial door. One of them was the godson of the Fire God Palace, Huasheng. As for the other person, the moment he appeared, Xian and Gu Shijiu were astonished to discover that this person, along with the space-time and energy he was in, didn't seem to exist. They couldn't even sense the slightest bit of this person's aura. Although they didn't know if the Divine King and the others were intentionally or unintentionally giving them a strong sense of oppression, they didn't feel the same as this person. That Hall Master. After this person arrived, Huazhu and Jin Jinwang hurriedly greeted him respectfully. Not only did Xian and Gu Shijiu feel this way, they also felt this way. After all, the difference in realms was too great. Ascension to become an immortal, divine flame casting body, elemental condensation, soul sea, spirit world, fate seal. This is the legendary person. As soon as this person came out, his eyes stared at the cocoon formed by Yun Nuashing. With his hands behind his back, he said softly. This kind of eyesight made everyone present blush with shame. "What kind of thing did you see with your eyes? Why couldn't we see it? Let that little guy sleep. During this period of time, seal the Fire God Palace and don't let anyone in." The Fire God Palace Home Master sighed and said, "I know you all want to know the origin of this little guy, but I only know a little more than you all." After saying that, he waved to everyone, then turned around and walked down the Fire God Palace. Everyone looked at each other and was stunned for a long time until the Home Master waved to them again. Only then did they quietly leave the top floor. Following the withdrawal of everyone, this place also became quiet. Only the 2 colored flames continued to burn tirelessly as they emitted a soft, explosive sound. Within the light cocoon, a powerful life was quietly being nurtured, waiting for the moment to transform into a phoenix and undergo a nirvanic rebirth. Our 9 elements temple has existed since the ancient era. At the same time, there are the current 8 great clans and many other great sects and great forces. They have all been annihilated in the long river of time. In the huge spiral staircase of the side hall of the main hall, there were many lifelike portraits of people placed there. The beautiful lines made people feel as if the person was completely printed on the portraits and not drawn. Those hanging here were all the outstanding disciples of the Fire God Palace. Only the most outstanding disciples were qualified to hang a portrait here. Many disciples of the 9 Elements Temple also secretly regarded this as the greatest honor. They were all working hard, looking forward to the day when their portrait could be hung here. To be honest, the 9 Elements Temple has existed since the first half of the ancient era, and the 8 great clans appeared in the middle of the era. At that time, the first Hall Masters had already fallen, and after many generations, it was Qi Huang and Xian Shun's turn to rise. At that time, the reputation of the 9 Elements Temple had already spread throughout the divine world, and even the people in the outer star field knew about the existence of the 9 Elements Temple. I still haven't found the birthplace of the primogenitor and the others. There's also no detailed information about them. Perhaps they were all erased by history. After so many years, not many things from the ancient era are left, let alone the archaic era. After walking around in circles for a long time, a small platform suddenly appeared in their line of sight. Inside the platform, there was a dust-covered door and a light step on it would cause dust to fly. The Fire God Palace's hall master stood in front of the door on the platform and gently pressed his palm on the door. Then a ray of light appeared on the door, and a lot of energy traces suddenly appeared on the ordinary door. All of them extended from the place where the hall master had just pressed his palm on. It seemed to be a kind of seal. Maybe you've already guessed that an immortal great force, a great force that has spanned 2 eras, must have produced a divine realm expert. That is, a reincarnation realm expert. According to my understanding, Qi Huang and the others are reincarnation realm experts, but they have not been crowned with the title of God. The 9 Elements Temple is no exception. The ancestors have indeed stepped into the reincarnation realm, but they are far stronger than the reincarnation realm experts of the later generations. When the hall master said this, his back slightly straightened, and a kind of respect was born from the bottom of his heart for the ancestors who had already passed away. Could it be? Hearing this, Jin Wang couldn't help but tremble and murmur in a low voice. That's right. The hall master nodded and said, the ancestors have stepped into the divine realm. They're the strongest experts in the world who are invincible. The birth of 9 divine realms in a row. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Even the Fire God Palace's great elder couldn't help but sigh, but he didn't believe it from the bottom of his heart. Wasn't it said that there would only be 1 divine realm expert? Those are all false rumors. Who can really say that, other than the mythological era, there was no time when divine realm experts coexisted? It's just that no one knows. Moreover, divine realm experts like the ancestors are not really invincible existences. Knowing what they were thinking, the hall master shook his head and said, "Ah!" Everyone was stunned. Then they suddenly understood something. Back then, the 9 Shrine Primogeniture and the others had fallen in the Ganyuan region. As gods, they had already ascended to the heavenly god realm. Their lifespan would be greatly extended. How could they disappear so easily? Thinking about it this way, the only remaining possibility was that they had encountered an unprecedentedly strong enemy, so strong that even the divine realm experts couldn't fight against them, and finally fell in battle. Could it be the 4 beasts? Or other divine beasts of the god era? Jin Wang couldn't help but ask. I don't know. We have thought of many answers, and you are thinking in the same direction as us. Although we want to deny it, this is the only answer that is most acceptable. The hall master nodded and sighed. Divine beasts that grew from the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, whether they were light or dark, good or bad, had power that even divine realm experts couldn't contend with. Legends said that they were comparable to divine realm experts. If this was the case, then a lot of things would make sense. We don't know the truth, but there is one thing that we know, and this is something that only the higher-ups of the 9 Elements Temple knew. The world has never heard of it, nor known about it, Hall Master Huis said solemnly. Back then, the 9 Elements Temple Masters were life and death friends. From the moment they met, they went forward hand in hand. In the eyes of the world, I'm afraid that the relationship between brothers was nothing more than that. They were a group of close friends, but more like a family. According to the introduction left in the ancient books, no matter where the ancestors went, they went together. But later, we found some problems. Hall Master Hu paused, looked at the stone door that was gradually opening, and sighed heavily. What's the problem? Jin Wang quickly asked. Among the 9 divine temples, although the Light Temple has always been the most powerful and well-deserved leader, they have always kept a low profile, just like the Light Temple style now. As for us, the style of the other divine temples is more or less related to the ancestors back then. Therefore, the Golden Temple has always been the one in charge. When the stone door was fully opened, Temple Master Huis sighed again and took the lead to walk through the door. He then waved his hand behind him, and the others hurriedly followed him in. The ancestors are the same. The more active ancestor gene is the leader. When Hall Master Huis said this, his expression was a little strange, and he didn't know how to address them. After entering the stone gate, they found themselves in a dark and narrow passageway. After everyone had entered, the stone gate slowly closed. After walking for an unknown period of time, the space in front of them suddenly became spacious. Everyone also filed out and stood aside. Hall Chief will waved his fiery red sleeves gently. He lifted his head and looked at the sky. As he waved his sleeves, light gradually appeared in this space. It slowly brightened up. A moment later, it finally became bright. In the spacious and bright room, bookshelves were arranged in a crisscrossing manner. On the bookshelves were various ancient books. An ancient and vicissitudes of life assaulted everyone's faces, and they couldn't help but sigh at the passage of history. These ancient books are many times older than I am. They were all left behind by the ancestors using some methods. Perhaps they already knew that they didn't have long to live. In this ancient house that was filled with the fragrance of books, facing the entrance, there were some carefully protected portraits hanging on the walls of the platform on the second floor. They were much more realistic than the ones they had seen earlier. These are the portraits of the ancestors. They were left behind by the first temple masters in the earliest days of the divine temple. They are the most precious things, and, as you can see, Hall Master who couldn't help but shake his head. How could this be? The 9 ancestors, and that is, apart from the first elder, everyone else widened their eyes in shock. Although they didn't recognize any of the people depicted in the portraits, they had witnessed a very strange thing. There were 10 portraits hanging on the wall. Moreover, they didn't find one of them unfamiliar. This was because the person in the portrait, it was too similar to Yun Nuashing. Chapter 424. On the tall wall hung 10 portraits filled with the aura of time. 9 of them were people they did not recognize, but from a little bit of characteristics, they could recognize that they were the ancestors of the temples. However, in the middle of the portrait, there was a black-haired man with a stern face. If he were to be slightly modified, his eyebrows would be slightly elongated, slightly raised, and his chin would be a little sharper. That appearance would be exactly the same as Yun Nuashing. When the 9 divine temples were born, there was a hidden 10th Hall Master. He was the best friend of the primogenitors, and the leader was him. If I am not mistaken, he is that little fellow's ancestor, Hall Master was said solemnly. The 10th Hidden Temple Master? What the hell? Everyone was shocked when they heard this. They did not understand what the sudden appearance of a Hidden Temple Master meant. I don't know the details. According to the fragments of information left behind by the ancestors, the 10 of them were as close as brothers. They said that without him, there would not be the 9 temple today. It was because of his suggestion that the 9 ancestors established the sect and developed it to this day. It is not an exaggeration to say that he is the true founder of the 9 temple. Temple Master was said. But even if he is an ancestor, he looks too much like Little Star. He doesn't look like an ancestor, but more like a father and son. In other words, grandfather and grandson don't look that much alike. Everyone was stunned. They didn't know what to say for a while. The Gold God King even started a ridicule. This is the truth. It is useless to argue. Moreover, we don't even know who the other half of this child's ancestor is. Temple Master was said with a bitter smile. In that case, the portraits that Temple Master gave us were engraved from this one. Jin Wang suddenly thought of something and quickly asked. In a 9 temple, almost everyone had seen a portrait of a person. That portrait was the one that was hanging in the middle of the 10 portraits. That person was Yun Nuashing's ancestor. Although they knew that they were looking for this person, they did not expect that this person would be one of the co-founders of the 9 temples. He joined the 9 divine temple, but disappeared later on. Another time was an era ago, when he met someone who was suspected to be his father. However, before he could make contact with him, he received news that the person had died in battle. That portrait was from that person. Now that the little fellow has come to the 9 divine temple, this is the 2nd time. Hall Master sighed softly and said, "Since the bloodline has been passed down, and we haven't found any big clans in the divine realm over the years, it can only be passed down through a single bloodline. Generation after generation, across several eras, until the current Yun Nuo planet. That person's methods back then could be said to be miraculous. This child is a member of the 9 temple. No matter how much time has passed, no matter how many eras have passed, this is constant. It is the same for the 10 primogenitors and for us. Hearing the relief in Temple Master Ho's voice, everyone fell silent. They did not expect there to be such a deep meaning behind it. He is someone who is tied to the 9 divine temples. At this moment, Yao Hua could not help but sigh. Thinking back to what the elder had said to him, he was still a little unconvinced at the beginning, thinking that Yin Nuo planet was not important to the 9 divine temples, and was just a person with greater potential. Now, it seemed that he was indeed someone who was tied to the 9 divine temples, and was deeply entangled with them. According to the broken marks left behind by the primogenitors, this chief temple master is not even a match for the 9 primogenitors. He is the soul of the primogenitors. Temple Master was said, 9 primogenitors can't even defeat one. If the news they had just heard had shocked Jin Wang and the others, then this news had left them dumbfounded. They did not know if they had heard wrongly or if the chief temple master was really too powerful. Speaking of which, Hall Master was suddenly thought of something. He lowered his head and rubbed his chin as he pondered. The crowd, who had yet to recover from the shock, did not care about what he was thinking. Their minds were constantly replaying the words that Hall Master Hua had just said. They were still imagining things. By the time everyone recovered, they saw that Temple Master Hua was looking for something in the rows of bookcases. Dust fell from the bookcases and landed on his face. He could not help but cough dryly. When everyone saw this, they quickly gathered around him. The first elder asked curiously, "Temple Master, what are you doing?" Back then, some of the things left behind by the primogenitors must be handed over to him. This is the primogenitor's wish. We were not able to hand it over to him the previous 2 times. Now that it is my turn to look after it, I have to hand it over to him. Temple Master Hua patted the dust off his body and waved his hand to get rid of the dust in front of him. Everyone looked at each other and tactfully did not walk over to take a look. This was something that only the temple masters of the past could know about. They could not ask about it. The arrival of Yun Nuoxing's group caused the Fire Divine Hall to become extremely lively. Some of the disciples and even the elders in the Fire Divine Hall were extremely curious about the person they had been searching for all this time. In the past few years, the elders in the Divine Hall basically did not have any time to rest. They'd been wandering around outside the entire time. It was because they had accidentally seen Yin Nuoxing in the Taiyuan domain. Only when Jin Wang and the others could no longer hold themselves back and personally set off to find Yin Nuoxing did the 9 divine halls calm down slightly. Afterwards, many incidents occurred, causing the God Kings and the 9 geniuses who had been cultivating in seclusion to become active members. The 9 temple masters were also waiting. They were waiting for the day when Yin Nuoxing officially stepped into the 9 divine halls. Although she had really entered now, she had entered while sleeping. Therefore, after settling Yin Nuoxing's matters, the next day, Temple Master Hua sent the news to the other 8 divine halls, letting everyone know that the child of God had returned. Almost a minute after the news was sent, 8 huge floating islands appeared around the Fire Divine Hall. Bright lights gathered together, so beautiful that the disciples of the divine halls were blinded. The most shocking thing was that the Light Divine Hall, the legendary divine hall that had always been hidden in the void, had actually appeared in its entirety because of one person. A space jump required an enormous amount of energy. On such a huge floating island, a space jump over a relatively long distance was enough to drain a Netherworld King powerhouse dry. But now they had crossed an immeasurable distance, leaping over from 3 other places in the Divine Prefecture. This kind of means was daunting to look at. Just as the 9 divine halls converged, dozens of streams of light suddenly shot up into the sky from the other 8 divine halls, rushing uniformly toward the Fire Divine Hall in the center. Temple Master Hua's cheeks trembled at the speed of these 8 old fellows, but he did not say anything. He knew that only in this kind of matter, their enthusiasm would shock everyone. After everyone heard the details reported by Jin Wang and the others, they flew toward the top of the Divine Hall without saying a word. When they saw the top of the Divine Hall, they couldn't help but be a little speechless. Then, they tiptoed toward the light cocoon in the middle. Dozens of pairs of eyes swept over it inch by inch, as if they couldn't wait to cut it open. This caused the light cocoon to tremble, as if it was frightened. The few hall masters walked forward and extended their hands to pat it gently. Then, everyone saw that the endless flame suddenly became much more vigorous, as though it had been strengthened. The energy that was originally flowing quickly in the surroundings suddenly became abnormally turbulent. In the end, the majestic suction force formed an energy whirlpool that was 100 feet wide in the sky, continuously absorbing the energy of the outside world. Such a huge extraction of energy caused everyone to be a little worried. They were afraid that the Yun-Nuo planet would not be able to withstand it. However, after thinking that this fellow had a spiritual divine body, they calmed down again. It could even withstand the energy of a Nether King, so this was not a big deal. After confirming that there was no problem, the temple masters stood silently for a long time. Then, they turned around and returned to the divine hall. Before they left, they expressed that there were some things that they should throw to this guy. Hearing the same words as Temple Master Hua, Jin Jinwang and the others couldn't help but cover their faces. What exactly did he leave behind? Knowing that Yun Nuoxing had returned, he wanted to take it? After the 9 divine halls converged, the 9 temple masters cut off the connection between the divine halls and the outside world, as they were worried that would affect Yun Nuoxing's recovery. They also warned their own disciples not to spread this matter. Nobody objected to this. The area of the floating island was very large. It was comparable to some medium-sized cities. Moreover, this time, the 9 divine temples had unexpectedly gathered together. The 9 floating islands were running around. It wouldn't be a problem to stay here for 10 years. Moreover, the energy here was much denser than the outside world. Since the divine halls were in seclusion, Xian and the others naturally chose to stay. As long as Yun Nuoxing didn't wake up, she wouldn't be completely at ease. She sat on the top floor of the Fire Divine Hall every day, guarding and waiting for Yun Nuoxing to wake up. The 2 little girls, Ming, who had been unconscious all this time, were also settled here. As for Yuan Shi, he would stay beside Yun Nuoxing for a long time every day. Then, he would run to the Divine Wind Divine Hall and exchange pointers with their disciples. He would also learn the essence of the Divine Wind Divine Hall. After all, if the Divine Wind Divine Hall's understanding of the elements was ranked second among the 9 divine halls, no one would dare to be ranked first. After dozens of eras, he had specialized in one element and passed it down generation after generation. No one could compare to him. Temple Master Feng also tacitly approved of his actions. He was Yun Nuoxing's good friend and also the young master of the Yuan family. As the next master of the Yuan family, anyone would be happy to have another staunch ally. Since that was the case, it didn't matter. At first, the disciples of the Divine Wind Divine Hall were a little conflicted. However, with Yuan Shi's temperament, he got along well with them in just 2 or 3 days and gradually became familiar with Fengya and the others. Time flowed like water. In the blink of an eye, spring passed and autumn came. In the Emerald Forest, a green and yellow light was playing mischievously and chasing each other into the distance. Only the Divine Wind Divine Hall was still green. Above the sky, dark clouds were densely packed. Lightning fell from the sky like raindrops. Streaks of silver-blue lightning shot out from the clouds like giant snakes. Every time they collided, it would cause the huge energy whirlpool in the sky to fluctuate a little. Some of the overflowing lightning was even swept away by the whirlpool and sent to the light cocoon in the center of the Divine Hall. In the past half a year, heavenly tribulations had occurred frequently. Everyone was already used to such a scene. However, every time this happened, some of the male disciples who were walking around in the Divine Hall would unconsciously stop their footsteps and stare nervously at the sea of lightning in the sky. Even the Divine Son of the Fire Divine Hall, Hua Sheng, was not spared. Looking at the slender figure flashing in the sea of lightning, his entire body could not help but tense up. In the sea of lightning, A purple figure flashed past quickly. Her long purple hair fluttered in the wind. The lightning illuminated her ethereal face that was covered by a dignified expression. The purple robe stuck to her charming body, outlining her perfect and moving curves. Her entire body was filled with majestic five-colored energy. Although 3 of the colors were relatively thin, she could still use them. For the past half a year, Xian had been staying beside the light cocoon formed by Yun Nuashing. The rich energy there allowed her cultivation speed to increase exponentially. The cultivation of the 5 elements body was a bit similar to that of the divine body. As long as there was enough energy of the 5 elements body, the cultivation speed would be very fast. Originally, she was in the half-immortal realm. With the help of the almost endless energy, she forcefully broke through the shackles and stepped into the immortal realm. On that day, it was also because of the uniqueness of the 5 elements body that the heavenly tribulation was triggered for the first time. Perhaps because she had an obsession in her heart, Xian's cultivation speed was not any slower than that of Yun Nuashing. She climbed up step by step. Every few small realms, she had to undergo a tribulation. This speed made Yao Hua and the others feel a little ashamed. They watched her undergo a tribulation every 10 days or half a month. After each tribulation, they could feel that her aura was much more powerful than before. Their mouths and tongues were a little dry. The thunderbolts in the sky lasted for more than an hour. Finally, they slowly dissipated. Xian slowly landed on the roof of the divine palace. Her purple clothes were a little burnt, and some parts of her skin were exposed. Her plump breasts kept rising and falling. Every tribulation was a test. Every person who had undergone a tribulation would have a lingering fear when thinking about it. Because she had the 5 elements body, there was a chance that she would trigger the energy of heaven and earth to trigger a tribulation. Ordinary people would only undergo a tribulation for the first time when they stepped into the initial God realm. In comparison, Yun Nuashing and Xian began to undergo the baptism of the heavenly tribulation much earlier. Seeing that Xian was fine, the male disciples below heaved a sigh of relief. The disciples of the 9 divine palaces did not know much about her. They only knew that this beautiful girl, who looked very quiet, had always stayed on the top floor of the divine palace and rarely came out. That place was designated as a forbidden area by the 9 divine palace masters. Except for specific people, no one was allowed to enter at will. And every time she came out, she would undergo a tribulation. Everyone could only look up at the beautiful figure in the sky for a little more than an hour until their necks were sore. Then, they watched her weakly walk up to the top of the divine palace. If it were not for the fact that the heavenly tribulation could not be helped by outsiders, they would probably rush up to help her and save her from the sea of suffering of the tribulation. Of course, these thoughts were quickly nipped in the bud, because the thunderbolts in the sky were extremely powerful. They were not able to resist at all. If they were hit by any one of them, they would probably be bettered in for half a year. Such a monstrous talent made those geniuses in the divine palace feel inferior. At least, they did not have the ability to trigger a tribulation. Chapter 425. On the fiery red roof of the divine palace, colorful energy gathered into balls. Some of the threads that extended from the light cocoon were already brittle and would break into pieces with a light touch. There were layers of powder on the ground. There were also new threads in the surroundings, symbolizing the changes of time. Here was still the same scene. On the crystal platform, the light cocoon moved unhurriedly according to a certain pattern. The 2 flames intertwined and burned fiercely, giving off an inextinguishable vitality. Beside the crystal platform, Xian changed out of her tattered robe and put on a snow-white dress. She stared blankly at the light cocoon. Meimao was a little gloomy. Finally, she sighed faintly. It's been more than a year. Little star, why haven't you woken up yet? Xian whispered softly. It had been a year and a half since Yun Nuashing broke out her cocoon and was moved here. In this year and a half, she and Yuan she had cultivated rapidly. Xian had also passed many tribulations. However, Yin Nuoxing, who everyone was worried about, still hadn't broken out of her cocoon. At first, everyone thought that it was because her injuries were too serious. The vitality that she had consumed couldn't be replenished so easily. However, this thought was dispelled after Yin Nuoxing fell into a coma for a year. This was because the beautiful woman could feel that the light cocoon was now filled with boundless vitality. Yin Nuoxing should have completely recovered. Her spiritual strength was also spreading out like a vast ocean. However, why couldn't she wake up? Even Home Master Hua and the others didn't know. Although everyone was anxious about this situation, they couldn't do anything about it. The light cocoon couldn't be torn apart. They could only wait quietly for Yin Nuoxing to wake up on her own. Half a year's time quietly flew by like sand between one's fingers amidst this helpless and anxious wait. On the roof of the palace, Xian looked at the huge light cocoon. She stretched out her hand and gently caressed the light cocoon. The two flames that rose brightly lit up her slender hand. There was only warmth, and there wasn't the burning sensation of a divine flame. Little star. Mei Mao leaned her delicate body against the cocoon of light and pressed her delicate ears against it. She could hear the rhythmic beating coming from inside the cocoon, and a trace of sadness flashed across her eyes. She couldn't help but murmur, "You proud star, you always say that you're going to travel the entire God realm. How can you stop here?" These words did not have an immediate effect. The sound of the light cocoon's movement was still neither fast nor slow, and it lingered in this place without dispersing. Yin sighed in disappointment. She raised her head and looked at the sky outside. Just as she was about to sit down, a soft laugh caused her delicate body to suddenly freeze. People need a rest, don't they? I've been running around all these years. It's time for me to take a nap once in a while. Little girl, Fire Divine Palace. In a training field near the Central Divine Palace. Many disciples of the Fire Divine Palace were gathered here, and with the convergence of the 9 divine palaces, there were also many disciples of the other divine palaces. In the building at the side, from time to time, there would be strong flashes of light, and the sound of violent energy explosions would be covered up when they came out of the building, so they did not disturb the cultivation of others. After a long time, the door of the building slowly opened. A few figures dragged their tired bodies out from inside. Their robes were torn, and one of them walked out with a naked upper body. What kind of training is this? It's torture, torture. A white figure was massaging his shoulders. The wounds all over his body caused him to grimace in pain. His slightly pale face had a steadier look to it, making the current Yuan Shi more solemn than before. "Ah, I told you from the beginning. This is the training system that the Divine King and the others personally set up. This is only the 7th stage, and we're not even halfway through." Walking at the front, the naked Yao Hua couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Your family's divine sons and divine daughters don't have the fortune to enjoy it. Why do you have to be thrown in here to receive this inhumane training?" Yuan Shi asked doubtfully. "This?" Lei Ming coughed dryly, pinched his throat, and imitated Jin Wang's voice. "You are the future 9 kings, and will inherit the title of Divine King. The others should do what they should do. If you don't cultivate well, then fight until you're good." After saying that, the 9 of them smiled bitterly together. Yuan Shi rolled his eyes. How could they fight until they were good? Looking around, Yuan Shi felt the warmth of the sun on his body. He slowly took a deep breath, and his gaze involuntarily stopped at the center of the divine palace. For a year and a half, the storm in the ghost forest had subsided. The news of Yin Nuoxing breaking 3 eternal divine weapons was known all over the world. Just thinking about it was shocking. However, such an earth-shattering achievement was exchanged for more than a year of deep sleep. It was hard to accept. Seeing that Yuan Shi was standing still, everyone stopped and turned their gazes to the top of the Fire Divine Palace. Yao Hua couldn't help but sigh and say, "It's been another half a year. Nuoxing has been sleeping for so long. Nothing will happen to him, right? Shut your crow's beak. Little Star is lucky. Nothing will happen to him." Hearing this, Mu Ling raised her eyebrows and slapped him on the head. Then tell me, when will he wake up? It's been a year and a half. Yao Huang muttered and touched his head. Lei Ming shook his head and looked at the sky in a daze. I'm afraid the Divine King and the Palace Master don't know about this. Senior brother, the Divine King, and the others want you to go to the Divine Palace. Hearing the soft voice behind them, Yao Hua and the others came back to their senses and turned their heads to look. It turned out that it was a few disciples who were quite famous in the Fire God Shrine. The former was stunned and said, "Did the Divine King say what it was about?" "No, we just came out of the Divine Palace. He just asked us to pass on a message. He said, if you see those 10 guys, tell them to come." A disciple repeated, "I'll go too." Yuan Shi pointed at himself in astonishment. Logically speaking, this was an internal matter of the Divine Palace. Why would they ask him? "Yes, I have a bad premonition." Yao Hua laughed hollowly. "I told you not to jinx it." Wood Spirit gritted her teeth and kicked Yao Hua with her long and slender leg. "Boss, half of what you say usually comes true." At this time, Hui Ji, who didn't talk much, couldn't help but say, "Then let's go there first. But we have to change our clothes first. If we go there like this, the Divine King and the others will carve us as a souvenir." Lei Ming nodded and pointed at his body. Then, he pointed at Yao Hua and the others and smiled. Sigh. The 9 people couldn't help but sigh at the same time. Seeing their senior brothers and sisters walking towards the Divine Palace with a wry smile, the young disciples looked at each other. Why did it seem like they were going to the battlefield? Could it be that the eternal night forest in the north of the Taiyuan region has opened? Senior brother and the others have been summoned there. Is it related to this? A young man asked curiously. The eternal night forest that is said to open once in 1,000 years? It is said that it is always night there. There is no light. It is a strange place. It is the complete opposite of the heavenly sun forest in the Ganyuan region. It is said that there are many secrets buried in the eternal night forest. It is not man-made. It is a strange place formed naturally. There are even some places that can speed up cultivation and change one's foundation. Later on, many experts were buried in the eternal night forest. There are many more things inside. But that place isn't a ruin, so not many people swarmed in. But I once heard that some people found high-grade cultivation techniques and mental cultivation techniques left behind by their predecessors in the caves of the Forest of Eternal Night, and there were even divine-grade profound skills and secret techniques. Divine-grade TSK. I have never seen such a level of secret technique in my life. If I can get one, what are you talking about? Those things are not things that people of our level can touch. Did you forget that the Son of God of our 9 gods temple attracted the attention of many people because of a divine weapon? A female disciple said in a low voice. I know that. The second divine sword of the divine sword record, Ling Hong. I really want to see with my own eyes how beautiful that level of weapon is. Cough. All right, let's not talk about this kind of thing. Suddenly, a heavy voice came from behind, causing the few of them to shrink their heads. Hearing Hua Sheng's slightly serious voice, everyone immediately stopped talking. It seemed that the former was still quite dignified in the Fire God Temple. Although Jin Wang said that he was a good person, it is rare for the 9 gods temple to gather together. Take the opportunity to go to the other temples to cultivate. Spar with the disciples there. Don't always gossip. Hua Sheng frowned and reprimanded. Yes, everyone was in awe. They nodded and solemnly responded. Then, under Hua Sheng's helpless gaze, they prepared to slip away like a wisp of smoke. However, at this moment, the entire training field suddenly trembled. The few of them staggered. Fortunately, Hua Sheng was at the side and caught them. Otherwise, they would have fallen flat on their faces. What's going on? What's going on? The sudden commotion immediately caused quite a commotion. All the disciples of the Fire Divine Hall who were training hurriedly stood up. In an instant, chaotic whispers continued to spread. Hua Sheng's eyes turned and discovered that the Fire Divine Hall was not the only one who had a commotion. Panicked voices also sounded from the other divine halls. Hua Sheng was also shocked. Then he shouted in a deep voice, "Calm down. With the Divine King and the Hall Master here, what can happen? Hearing Hua Sheng shout, the commotion subsided a lot. Everyone looked at each other for a while and nodded. This space was created by the ancestor and was personally maintained by the Hall Masters. It was very stable. Moreover, now that the 9 gods' temple had gathered, even if the time barrier collapsed, it could be blocked. Boom! Just as everyone gradually calmed down, the entire floating island suddenly shook again. This time, everyone who had calmed down discovered that it was not the floating island that was shaking, but the entire space. The atmosphere, the space is shaking. Feeling the vibration from the space, Hua Sheng's heart could not help but jump. Why would this unusually stable space shake violently today and be on the verge of collapse? Swoosh, swoosh. The sound of the space shaking also attracted the attention of many experts from the 9 gods' temple. Immediately, many figures rushed out from various places. In the end, they were suspended in the air. Their eyes were filled with shock as they looked at the space that was constantly distorting into a whirlpool. Vaguely, they seemed to feel an extremely terrifying aura that was slowly awakening like a slumbering demon. Boom! The clear and boundless sky seemed to darken the moment the space vibrated. Black clouds appeared out of nowhere, and energy flashed within the clouds. The majestic might of thunder caused the disciples below to tremble uncontrollably. Buzz! A couple of figures also swiftly appeared in the air. Their eyes swiftly swept over their surroundings. Finally, they paused on the Fire Divine Hall in the middle. Shock immediately flashed across their eyes after they sensed the extremely wild, violent, and chaotic aura. This is Little Star? But this energy, while the 9 floating islands were in an uproar because of this sudden commotion, a strange change also occurred in the top floor of the Fire God Temple. Little Star, you've finally woken up. At the top of the temple, Xian looked at the huge light cocoon in front of her in surprise. At this moment, the surrounding energy had become solid. A vast amount of elemental energy was surging in from the outside world and pouring into the light cocoon like a surging tide. Among this energy, she could feel a familiar aura quietly being emitted. Boom! While Xian was pleasantly surprised, 9 abnormally dense energy light pillars suddenly shot up from the 9 divine palaces, pointing towards the sky. Then, they suddenly turned in midair and shot towards the light cocoon in the Fire God Palace. The unceasing flow of energy caused the space to be unable to bear the burden and collapse. This is the purest elemental energy left in each temple. Seeing this scene, Jin Jinwang couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Such a huge amount of energy, even if they advanced, they wouldn't be able to use so much. The energy that permeated the air was filled with an unusually wild energy factor. The energy that swept past her made Xian feel a sense of oppression. After hesitating for a moment, she hurriedly picked up the 2 girls, tapped her feet on the ground, and rushed out of the temple. Even the Divine King and the others couldn't resist the energy pressure for a long time. Just as Xian retreated from the top of the temple, the energy that permeated the air burst out from the top of the temple like a volcanic eruption. The blazing energy that blotted out the sky rapidly condensed. In the end, under the shocked gazes of everyone, it condensed into a huge pillar of light that shot straight to the sky, shattering the dark clouds. Faintly, everyone seemed to see a phoenix surrounded by black flames spreading its wings and rushing into the sky. Boom! The space in the sky distorted. The energy pillar of light that was almost 10,000 feet tall suddenly turned into an energy storm. The power of the stars and elemental energy that came from beyond the heavens were all sucked in at this moment, gathering at the pole of the light pillar. This vast amount of energy gathered in the storm, causing the storm to explode with a dazzling light. Then, a powerful aura spread out like a tide at this moment. The dazzling light was like the divine light of creation, causing many people to shut their eyes tightly. It was a long while later before they opened their eyes, after which they saw that after the storm had dissipated, A gentle golden light sprinkled down from the sky. A slender figure was slowly spreading his 6 wings. The powerful and unusual aura was being emitted from this person's body. It was as if a god had descended to the world. This scene was gorgeous and beautiful. Xianlu? No, this is the emperor of the underworld. Sensing the strength of this strange aura, the faces of Jin Wang and the others instantly became sluggish. After a moment, they took a deep breath and muttered in disbelief. Chapter 426. The light pillars that pierced through the sky slowly disappeared. Golden light poured down from the sky and gathered on the figure. The mighty aura of the phoenix filled the space. Under such strong pressure, Jin Wang and the others' faces changed slightly, and they couldn't help but lower their bodies. Is this the child of God's destiny? Oh my God, this aura is something that even the deity king and the others can't match. This aura has surpassed the deity king and the others. This is the emperor of the underworld? Really? Damn. Tell me I'm dreaming. This child of God's destiny is obviously younger than me. Feeling the vast aura that permeated the sky, the 9 floating islands immediately burst into whispers. Among these voices, there was a hint of horror. Obviously, it was the first time they had seen such a young emperor of the underworld. It could be said that he was unprecedented and unparalleled. This guy forcefully dispelled the heavenly tribulation. No, assimilated it. And this aura, it should be the Netherworld Ruin sword. Its original body is at the top of the Immortal 5 around the 11th revolution. After the shock on his face lasted for a while, he gradually calmed down. After Jin Wang sensed it, he heaved a sigh of relief. He really thought that this was the aura of Yin Nuashing, jumping 3 levels in one go to the level of the Emperor of the Underworld. No matter how he looked at it, it felt like a dream. Even a genius with exceptional talent couldn't reach this level without millions of years. This little guy is interesting. In the sky, Hall Master Hua and the others stood in the air and looked at the figure under the light with interest. They couldn't help but laugh. Interesting. A phoenix, still in its infancy, has already made a soul contract with him. A divine beast? Haha. I heard that the Grand Hall Master also had a few divine beasts back then. In the end, he didn't leave any for his descendants. The Netherworld Ruin sword, the Ling Hong sword, the Sun Cross, the Lunar Platform, and many other divine weapons. If I'm not wrong, he should have been repairing and strengthening the divine weapons in the past year. Many of them seem to have been broken. Repairing a divine artifact requires a lot of energy. The key is that he also forcibly extracted the origin elemental energy from the bottom of the temple to repair and strengthen it. After all, the cultivation of a spiritual godly body requires the assistance of a divine artifact. Well, if it weren't for the fact that the energy in this world is too dense, I'm afraid that the little guy would have to delay his breakthrough by 10 years. The few palace lords said one by one. Their words were filled with admiration. If others were to hear it, they would blush with shame. It was extremely difficult to obtain the praise of experts of this level. While everyone was exclaiming in their hearts, the golden light in the sky gradually disappeared after 10 minutes. Following the disappearance of the golden light, the human figure in the sky also became clear. In the end, everyone could see it clearly. In the sky, the young man lazily stretched his back. His entire body emitted a crackling sound, as if a switch was being connected. This power, feeling the smoothness that spread throughout his body, Yin Nuashing clenched his fist. The Netherworld Ruin sword and the Ling Hong sword appeared in his hand and quickly merged together. The energy of the same origin that connected the heart fascinated him. Holding the Netherworld Ruin sword, his arms suddenly swept horizontally in front of him. A dazzling sword light flew out from the tip of the sword. The space in front of him was cut open, and even the surrounding space exploded inch by inch. If it hit a god of the Underworld Emperor directly, he would probably be severely injured. Too powerful. Feeling this unusually vast power, Yun Nuoxing could not help but smile. This time, after recovering from his serious injuries, he was able to better control the various divine weapons and divine weapons. He did not know how much stronger they had become. I forgot that this kid is a destructive maniac. The faces of the palace lords twitched as they looked at the huge hole. They couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Chi-Wei, oh Chi-Wei, I'm going to pay you back for the 2 times you tricked me. Yun Nuoxing's light purple eyes that were dyed with a bit of fiery red suddenly surged with a bit of coldness. Although he had forcefully blocked the Dark Abyss sword and should have fainted long ago, he still vaguely knew what Chi-Wei had done. Twice, he had stopped him from leaving, causing his body to be possessed and almost losing his soul. Whoosh! Just as Yun Nuoxing's killing intent was boiling, the sound of rushing wind could be heard. Then, a dozen figures flashed and appeared beside Yun Nuoxing. You're finally willing to wake up. Jin Wang patted Yun Nuoxing's shoulder hard. For more than a year, they had been tormented miserably for Yun Nuoxing. Their hearts were still in their throats. Ah, thank you, Divine King. Yun Nuoxing smiled awkwardly, spread his hands, and said respectfully, There's no use thanking us. If you want to say something, you should thank a certain silly girl. For more than a year, she almost never left our side. She probably hasn't had a good rest. Jin Wang waved his hand and then said with a strange smile. Hearing this, Yun Nuoxing's gaze turned towards Ziyin, who had a moving smile on her face, and his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. During this past year, Ziyin had always been by his side, and he'd always known that. Now, as he looked at this extremely beautiful and familiar smile, for a moment, he actually didn't know what to say, and he opened his mouth but was unable to speak. Jin Wang looked at him, standing there like a piece of wood. He raised his eyebrows, then grinned and pushed Yun Nuoxing hard, causing him to stagger and almost fall into Ziyin's arms. That, Ziyin. He tilted his head and looked at Jin Wang in astonishment. Then, he braced himself and turned his head. Looking at the person who was only a few inches away from him, he scratched his head and laughed dryly. Unknowingly, there was another beautiful figure in his life that he would remember. That day, in Xingyu City, it was Ziyin who lit up the fire of his life that was about to fade away. It was also after that there was one more person by his side who gradually became close to him. She added a touch of fresh blood to his boring and confusing journey and also pointed him in the right direction. Ziyin always said that he was the most dazzling star in her life, the beacon of her life. But she didn't know that, compared to Yun Nuoxing, it was also because of her that he had a goal and something he wanted to do. In his heart, he had always wanted to help Ziyin restore her constitution. In the past, perhaps it was out of gratitude, or perhaps it was because of other thoughts. But now, after spending such a long time with her, his state of mind quietly changed. He wanted her to be well. Looking at the face that was slightly red because of embarrassment, Ziyin couldn't help but laugh. The smile on her cheeks could turn all living things upside down. She opened her arms slightly and threw herself into the warm embrace that she hadn't seen for more than a year. Looking at the young girl who threw herself into Yun Nuoxing's arms, the entire Nine Deities hall suddenly fell into a strange silence. Faintly, there seemed to be the sound of countless hearts breaking. On the other hand, Hall Master Hua and the others were stunned. They looked at each other for a while, then let out a dry cough and sighed. How young? Then, they quickly disappeared. Jin Wang and the others looked away calmly. They were already used to it. The two of them had shown their affection for each other many times in public. Yun Nuoxing's handsome face turned even redder when the fragrance wafted to his nose. 2 soft arms appeared on his back. He couldn't help but sigh softly in his heart. He stretched out his arms stiffly and slowly wrapped them around the slender waist. The 6 wings in front of him folded and covered Ziyin. Yun Nuoxing took a light sniff of the young girl's fragrant hair. His heart was incomparably calm. Cough. After the two of them kissed for nearly a minute, Jin Wang finally couldn't stand the increasingly hot temperature. He immediately coughed violently. Hearing the cough, Ziyin, who was curled up in Yun Nuoxing's arms like a little bird, finally woke up from the happiness and excitement of seeing the person she missed. Immediately, an intoxicating blush appeared on her beautiful face. She gently extricated herself from Yun Nuoxing's arms. Seeing his stunned look, she couldn't help but laugh. Ah! A soft sound of surprise came from his throat. Yun Nuoxing's mouth was wide open. His handsome face was as red as a tomato, and his vision was a little blurry. Seeing the deep affection between the two, Jin Wang couldn't help but laugh bitterly. He said, "Young people, it's easy to show off. This is a public place. Go back and be intimate. No one will blame you even if the house collapses." As soon as these words came out, the usually calm Hua Ji, Shui Xia, and Jin Ying's faces turned red. The beautiful woman couldn't help but roll her eyes and give Jin Wang a hard slap. "All right, I just told Yao Hua and the others. I'll tell you as well." Jin Wang shook his head and smiled. "What happened?" Yun Nuoxing was startled. The trip to the Goski forest in the Sourcepeak domain came to a successful conclusion when you woke up. The radiant sacred lake and the abyss dark sword were both hidden in the mist. Over the past year, many experts have come again. The abyss you blasted open is still there, but the sacred lake is nowhere to be seen. Abyss? I blasted it out? Yun Nuoxing blinked, tilted his head, and asked doubtfully. He didn't remember what he blasted out. You don't remember? Hearing this, everyone present was stunned and couldn't help but widen their eyes. That day, he used the falling stars to turn the entire Ghost Chi forest into an abyss and shattered 3 eternal divine weapons. How could he forget such a glorious battle record? Huh? Yun Nuoxing scratched his head, not knowing why they were staring at him. After a while, he was stunned. Could it be the chaos? As this thought appeared in his mind, the smile on Yun Nuoxing's handsome face slowly faded. When his consciousness was about to disappear, he did know that the darkness had invaded his body. Could it be that the abyss that Jin Wang mentioned was caused by it? I remember. Yun Nuoxing touched his face and laughed unnaturally. Everyone looked at each other for a while. Ahaha, let's not talk about this first. What was the matter we were talking about? Yun Nuoxing was sweating profusely and quickly changed the topic. Oh, it's like this. You know the Eternal Night Forest in the north of the Sourcepeak region, right? After being sealed for 1,000 years, it opened again. Jin Wang came back to his senses and nodded. It's one of the strange places where heaven and earth were born. It's a forest that's always shrouded in darkness. It's said that there are many miraculous places in the forest that can rapidly increase one's strength and build one's foundation. However, there's a natural energy seal that only opens once every 1,000 years. At this time, Zi whispered in his heart, if there's a chance, go there. If there's no change, the fire spark should still be there. Fire spark? Yun Nuoxing was stunned. Ranked 72nd on the Divine Flames list, Eternal Night Flame. Chapter 427. The Flame of Eternal Night. Yun Nuoxing was stunned when she heard this. She hurriedly sent her consciousness into her soul and looked at Ziyi, who was sitting in front of a table made of flames and quietly drinking tea. She hurriedly asked, "In the forest of eternal night? How do you know?" Ziyi gently put down the teacup and smiled. "Back then, I went to the forest of eternal night with that bastard, and I saw that flame that was still in its infancy. However, dozens of epochs have already passed, so I don't know if it's still there. If it's still there, it should have matured and can be subdued. However, it's most likely already been subdued by someone. You'll know if you use that treasure map to take a look. Even if it's a divine flame, it would only have matured for tens of thousands or millions of years. It's already been dozens of epochs, so how could it still be there?" Yun Nuoxing muttered. However, she still took out the treasure map and looked at the upper left corner. She was stunned and said in astonishment, "Ah, it's still there. The divine flame coexists with the world. Even the gods cannot completely destroy it. They can only scatter it or seal it. As long as no one subdues it, it will continue to grow in that place. However, because the divine flame is too powerful without certain methods, it can't gain consciousness. Ziyi smiled and pointed at herself. Her meaning was self-evident. She had been strengthened by her previous owner with a godhead. On that day, dozens of epochs ago, it was that person who bestowed her with a unique consciousness, allowing her to become a unique life form. In that case, Ziyi, you've existed since the ancient era. You've existed for 50 or 60 epochs. PFFF. Yin Nuashing had just finished speaking in astonishment when a soft, jade-like arm wrapped around her neck. A huge force hit her neck, causing her to spit out a mouthful of water in pain. Her face gradually turned red. Big sister, I'm still very young. Ziyi revealed a beautiful smile that made anyone who saw it feel like a spring breeze. However, in Yin Nuashing's eyes, that smile was abnormally dangerous. There's killing intent. Yin Nuashing trembled as she muttered. So what if I've lived for a long time? A long time, an endless wait. More than 60 epochs passed in the blink of an eye. It's so fast that I can't even feel it's real. In reality, I've only been awake for 1,000,000 years. I've always accompanied him on his expeditions. I've walked countless paths and fought countless experts. In the end, I could only watch as he sealed me away in silence so that I could face a fate that I had no choice but to face. Zai, Mei Mao, was gloomy as she muttered to herself. She seemed to be talking to Yin Nuashing, but also seemed to be talking to herself. When Yin Nuashing sensed that the arm around his neck had loosened its grip, he wasn't in a hurry to break free. Instead, he leaned on Ziya's shoulder and replied softly, after waiting for several dozen eras. What exactly was it for? Aya, how would I know such a complicated and nonsensical thing? Ziyi rolled her eyes when she heard that. She gently wrapped her arms around Yin Nuashing's neck and rested her chin on his head. She said, in short, that heaven-defying ultimate God guy asked you to collect the things on the list. You have to do your best to collect them. The divine weapon list, the divine flame list, the devil thunder list, the heavenly treasure list, and all kinds of strange things. You have to dabble in all of them. Moreover, the divine flame list and the devil thunder list are not finished yet. Are you kidding me? Yin Nuashing's handsome face twisted in fear when he heard that. He would be exhausted to death. Yin Nuashing suddenly thought of something else and was stunned for a moment. He said, Hey, didn't you object to me collecting other divine flames? Why? Ziyi turned her beautiful face away and didn't say anything for a long time. She rubbed her head and said, Let's talk about it after we collect it. Besides, I don't think you can take the eternal night flame. Why? Think about it. The divine flame has existed for dozens of eras. It only takes 1,000,000 years for it to mature from its initial stage. It might take 1,000,000 years or even 100,000,000 years for it to mature. Don't you think it's strange that it hasn't been taken away after such a long time? You mean, could it be that this divine flame has developed intelligence and is difficult for others to subdue? Yin Nuashing asked doubtfully. No, I just think that no one can find it. Ziyi rested her chin on Yin Nuashing's head and shook her head. She said faintly, Moreover, the eternal night flame and the eternal night forest have a special relationship. As for how they are related, you told me so many years ago. I've long forgotten. She stuck out her tongue after she finished speaking. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes in response. Yin Nuashing nodded and said to Jin Wang and the others, Okay, let's go. I've lived in Taiyuan territory for a few years and wanted to take a look for a long time. However, I couldn't quite catch up with the journey, so I didn't go. I knew you would go. Upon hearing this, Jin Wang grinned and patted Yin Nuashing's shoulder. He was a little startled. Why did this meaningful look seem a little strange? It is said that there are great opportunities waiting for people to discover in the eternal night forest. However, those so-called opportunities aren't very attractive to old people like us. This time, the eternal night forest will be the same as usual. Only some young people will go there. Of course, our 9 deities temple won't just sit and watch. Moreover, we have other things to do, so... Jin Wang smiled mischievously. So, Yin Nuashing swallowed his saliva and laughed dryly. He had already guessed what Jin Wang's next sentence would be. Jin Wang reached out and dragged Jining over. He pressed his hands on her shoulders and pushed her forward. He smiled slyly and said, "I'll leave this girl and those 8 guys to you." Huh. 9 shocked voices suddenly exploded. Jining stared at Mei Mao in astonishment. She quickly turned her head and saw Jin Wang smiling like a fox. She suddenly forgot what she wanted to say. Yao Hua stood up, stunned. He pointed at himself, then looked at Yin Nuoxing and asked, "Deity King, you said that we should let Nuoxing lead the team and go alone." "Yes, why? You don't dare?" Jin Wang nodded calmly. "Isn't that obvious?" Yao Hua smiled bitterly. Those people that Yin Nuoxing provoked were not ordinary people. Although only the younger generation would go, who knew if there would be old monsters at the deity realm following them? Yin Nuoxing was fine by himself, but what if he didn't like them? It was quite scary just thinking about it. Yin Nuoxing only sighed softly at this result, then nodded. This was pretty much what he had guessed. Jin Wang and the others seemed to have wanted to be hands-off managers for a long time. They just happened to meet a freak like Yin Nuoxing, who happened to be one of them. If they didn't do it now, when would they? The 10 of them sighed together, then looked at each other for a while. They all smiled bitterly and shook their heads. After confirming the following itinerary, Yin Nuoxing also made some preparations. He had just come out of the state of ascension, so his body was not used to it. Moreover, his strength had increased by a lot. He also needed some time to get used to it. This trip was led by Yin Nuoxing, who was handpicked by Jin Wang. Together with the 9 future divine kings of the 9 deity temples, there were a total of 12 people in the group. This gave Yin Nuoxing a headache. He was really not used to giving orders. He said that he would lead the team. How was he supposed to lead the team? As if he knew Yin Nuoxing's temperament, Jin Wang also said that Jining would be the team leader of the team. This stunned both of them. The former did not think much of it, but the latter panicked. In the past, it was always Yao Hua who led the team. Why did she suddenly have to take the lead? The Golden Temple has always been the leader of the team. This generation can't fall behind. Yes. Jin Wang smiled slyly, making the 10 of them give him the middle finger in unison. After resting for a day, Yin Nuoxing was brought to the loft by the divine kings and the 9 temple masters. They told him everything that the 9 deity temples knew about him. "This is my ancestor." Looking at the middle of the 10 photos hanging on the loft, Yin Nuoxing touched his face in a daze. Why did he feel like he was looking into a mirror? Even if he was his ancestor, he looked too similar. While Yin Nuoxing was in a daze, the beautiful woman walked forward and put a golden ring on his finger. She stroked his head with her delicate hand and thought for a moment. Then she smiled and said, "You are our hope and the long-cherished wish of the 9 deity temples. Whether it is now or in the future, the 9 deity temples will be your home. If you are tired, come back and rest." "Long-cherished wish?" Yin Nuoxing asked curiously. "I don't know. This sentence was left behind by the ancestors. It seems like they said it for you." Jin Wang scratched his head. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing nodded gently. The divine kings and the others had always treated him as one of their own. The beautiful woman even treated him as her junior. No matter what had happened in the past or what would happen in the future, at least for now, Yin Nuoxing wanted to reciprocate their feelings. "Okay, when I have time, I will come back." Yin Nuoxing grinned. He quickly changed his words halfway through his sentence, causing the beautiful woman's gaze to soften. The temple masters stood to the side without saying anything. It was only when the divine kings and the others finished talking to Yin Nuoxing that the light god king walked forward. His entire body was glowing with a dazzling light. When Yin Nuoxing saw this, he couldn't help but exclaim that he was blind. This made the light god king very embarrassed. The other temple masters covered their mouths and snickered. The light god king's golden eyes seemed to have the power to see through everything. He looked straight at Yin Nuoxing as if he wanted to see through his soul. After a long while, he nodded and patted Yin Nuoxing's shoulder with his palm. Then, he stretched out a finger and gently tapped Yin Nuoxing's forehead. Ow! The gentle tap didn't have much power, but it made Yin Nuoxing cry out in pain. The light god king had injected a huge amount of information into his mind. The excessive amount of information made him dizzy, and he felt as if his soul was about to explode. "Why are you poking him?" When they heard Yin Nuoxing cry out in pain, the other temple masters who didn't understand the situation were stunned. The temple master of the divine, Wood Palace, quickly went forward to support him. Then he looked at the light God King reproachfully and said, Hearing this, the light God King's face twitched. However, when he saw Yin Nuoxing rolling his eyes, he was stunned again. The thing that he wanted to pass on to him wasn't simple, so much so that he had forgotten to consider whether Yin Nuoxing could take it or not. After a long while, Yin Nuoxing finally came back to his senses. He focused his gaze and was immediately overjoyed. He quickly cupped his fist towards the light God King and said respectfully, "Thank you, Senior, for passing on the technique." The light God King nodded and didn't say a word. It was unknown whether it was his nature or something else, but the way he looked at Yin Nuoxing was filled with gentleness. There was no sternness in his eyes. There are some things left behind by the primogenitor and your ancestor in the ring. It's been a long time, so we can't tell which belongs to the 9 primogenitors and which belongs to your ancestor. The 9 divine halls no longer need these things. You need them more than us. Temple Master Mu stretched out a slender finger and tapped Yin Nuoxing's head. A vast amount of life force was injected into his soul, causing the dizziness in his head to subside immediately. We will take care of the 2 girls for you. Perhaps there will be a solution. The next time you come back, they should be fine, Temple Master Mu said with a smile. Yin Nuoxing nodded. He was worried that Ming and the others were in a deep sleep, but there was nothing he could do. It was also good for them to stay in the sacred halls. The 9 temple masters were all people with profound achievements. It shouldn't be difficult for them to solve this problem. After resting for 3 days, all the information about the everlasting night forest had been poured into Yin Nuoxing's mind. He knew that it was time to move. When the dawn of the 4th day appeared in the sky, the disciples of the 9 sacred halls who came out for their morning training looked towards the sky. There, more than a dozen figures were standing in the wind. Their clothes were swaying in the breeze, and they looked otherworldly. The leader slowly opened his 6 wings. A ray of light shone on him, sacred and beautiful. "Little star, remember to be careful on this trip. Training is secondary. If there is any trouble, quickly retreat." The beautiful woman looked at the group of people who were ready to set off and said sternly. Yin Nuoxing smiled. He glanced past the God Kings one by one and took a deep breath. After that, he clasped 2 fingers together and waved them in front of his forehead. He smiled at everyone and said, "Don't worry, we will return safely." With that, he did not waste any more time. He turned around in a free manner and shot towards the space gate that he had opened long ago. In the blink of an eye, the group of people vanished from everyone's gazes. That little guy, Jin Wang, could not help but smile as he watched the space gate slowly vanish. Yin Nuoxing originally wanted to say that he would bring them safely back, but he changed his mind in the end. The beautiful woman nodded gently and smiled. He's probably finally treating himself as a member of the 9 sacred halls now. Jinshin smiled. Chapter 428. In the azure blue sky, there were no clouds for thousands of miles. There were no impurities at all. It was incomparably clear. 2 stars hung high in the sky, sprinkling down strands of blazing aura. Suddenly, a slight buzzing sound came from the silent sky. Then, a silver-blue crack opened in the sky without any warning, bringing with it a wave of chaotic spatial fluctuations. In just a few seconds, it expanded into a door that was about 10 feet tall. A moment later, a few figures slowly walked out of the spatial door. After they came out, they stood quietly beside the door and did not immediately move. A moment later, the spatial door rippled again. Then, a young man with 6 wings on his back slowly appeared. A majestic wind element was immediately drawn to him. After Yin Nuoxing appeared, the spatial door squirmed and slowly shrank. A few seconds later, it completely disappeared. In the clear sky, there were only a dozen or so figures standing there. "Let's go." Watching the spatial door close, Yin Nuashing stretched his back and clenched his fists so tightly that they made cracking sounds. After stretching for a while, he turned around and smiled at everyone. Everyone smiled and nodded. After Yin Nuashing identified the direction, they all flew toward the forest of eternal night in the north. It was said that only some of the younger generation would go to the forest of eternal night. That strange place was not attractive to those who had reached a certain level of strength. As for Yin Nuashing, he was tempted by Ziyi and reluctantly agreed to go. The people accompanying him were also Ziyin, Yuan Shi, and the future 9 kings of the 9 shrines. This kind of lineup, ignoring Yin Nuashing, was already considered quite strong among those of the same generation. However, in the end, they had only seen people who were about the same age as them. Among those of the same generation, Yin Nuashing knew that the strongest was Yuan Xian. Although he had never seen her fight, the strength of the 3 seals of the demon realm was still there. Yao Hua and the others felt somewhat unnatural about the purpose of this trip. When they thought about what their God King had said to them before they left, their hearts turned cold. If you can't break through 2 small levels, don't come back. At the thought of this, the 9 of them could not help but sigh. As expected, only their own people could say such words. Although the terrain there was strange, and there were all kinds of strange things that could help one's cultivation reach a higher level, that was not their backyard. They had received news that the people from the other origin regions would be there. When the time came, there would be a fierce battle. When they thought of this, they saw that a few meters ahead of them, 3 people were chatting and laughing. They did not feel the slightest pressure, as if they were just going for an outing. They could not help but sigh again. Hearing the sighs behind her, Yin Nuashing turned around and stroked her long hair that fluttered in the wind. She looked at the 9 people and said with a smile, "All right, you must be optimistic. You are the future divine kings." Hearing this, Yao Hua and the others cheered up slightly and smiled. Yin Nuashing was right. Although their cultivation was slightly behind the others at this time, they were born many years later than those people. Among this group, the one with the highest cultivation was Yuan Shi. After a year and a half of hard work, he had reached the 9th level of the immortal realm from the first transition to the 9th level of the immortal realm. The wind element had also reached the purest state through the unique cultivation method of the Fengshen Temple. Once the element was pure enough, the path after the immortal realm would be much easier. This trip to the Eternal Night Forest, if he had a little opportunity, he could try to break through to the half-demon level. Moreover, he had a rare god spirit body. As long as he was given enough time, his future achievements would definitely be amazing. Next were Yao Hua and the others. They were all at the 6th level of the immortal realm. Compared to Nightmare, Qi Haoyu and the others, they were much lower. However, the 9 people were very talented. Even Jin Wang and the temple master thought highly of them. After hearing Yin Nuashing's words, Xian smiled slightly. Now that Yin Nuashing had woken up smoothly and there was nothing wrong with her, she was completely relieved. Her usually tense cheeks also relaxed a lot. She also didn't have any thoughts about the Eternal Night Forest. She just followed Yin Nuashing because she wanted to go there. Among this group, she was the youngest, and her cultivation was not as high as the others. After a year and a half of cultivation, she had successfully reached the 3rd level of the immortal realm. This made Yin Nuashing very surprised. He had used various means to reach the 3rd level of the immortal realm from the immortal realm. He didn't expect this girl to jump from the immortal realm to the 3rd level of the immortal realm in a year and a half. Moreover, it was the result of her own cultivation. He didn't know what to say and was worried that she might have gone mad. "Look, I'm only at the 5th level of the immortal realm. You're already at the 6th level of the immortal realm. When we parted in Li Huan's city, I told you not to be surpassed by me. Didn't I do it?" Yin Nuashing gently exhaled, spread out her hands, and said with a smile, "Don't compare us with you. You're just a green chicken. We went through such inhumane cultivation from the 3rd level of the immortal realm to the 6th level of the immortal realm. You, on the other hand, woke up at the peak of the 5th level of the immortal realm." Hearing this, Yao Hua rolled his eyes. He couldn't help but tremble all over when he thought of their 18 levels of training. Sigh, you guys don't understand my pain. Every time I advance, I need a large amount of energy. Sigh, why do I have to compress this energy so much? Yin Nuashing shook his head pitifully as he gripped his lower abdomen and lamented. Get lost. The 9 people were so angry that they waved their hands at the same time, wanting to slap her. Now, the energy of Yao Hua and the others was only condensed to a solid or semi-solid state. The thing in their lower abdomens was dark and swarthy, without any luster. The difficulty of transforming from a solid state to a crystal was as difficult as transforming from a celestial crystal to a saint crystal. Without enough luck, even a god might not be able to transform it into a crystal. However, Yin Nuashing's energy was condensed into a crystal. This was something that everyone knew for a long time. It could be seen from the gorgeous color of the energy surrounding her body. The seal of the eternal night forest will probably be completely lifted in another day. It doesn't seem to be very far from here. We don't need the light element, so we should be able to reach it in half a day. Yin Nuashing took out the treasure map from her pendant and looked at it carefully. Then, she looked at the northern horizon and said softly, Let's speed up a bit. We should reach the stamping ground earlier. Let me... Absolutely not. Faintly guessing what Yin Nuashing was going to say next, Yao Hua and the others turned pale with fright. They hurriedly mobilized the wind element around them. With a whoosh, they turned into 9 rays of light and rushed towards the northern horizon. I haven't finished speaking yet. Yin Nuashing, who was left behind by the 9 people, couldn't help but smile bitterly. Xian and Yuan, she couldn't help but cover their mouths and laugh. They all understood why the 9 people were so nervous. The latter laughed and said, Brother, I won't help you clarify anything this time. Yin Nuashing rolled her eyes. Isn't it just a ship crash? Is there a need to be like this? My control over the light element is definitely a lot better now. The Eternal Night Forest was extremely famous even in the Sourcepeak region. It wasn't inferior to the Ghost Forest in the slightest. The most important factor was the spring water in it, the Night God Spring. The Moon God Spring was the opposite of the Night God Spring. The former was born in a place without light and condensed a lot of energy. As for the latter, it was the opposite. Yin Nuashing had already seen it in the Eastern Sea. Even the remnant energy of the Moon God Spring was enough to frighten people. The 2 holy springs had unique divine effects, which were extremely attractive to most people. Most of them were from the younger generation, because the holy springs had the miraculous effect of transforming one's body, condensing one's energy, and strengthening one's soul. It was even more effective for the younger generation. Among the young people who went, most of them were at the immortal rank. The proportion of demonic rank experts among the younger generation was relatively small. Some large forces would pay great attention to the Eternal Night Forest and send them there to nurture their outstanding disciples. The immortal rank and the demonic rank were the first dividing line. In the realm of the gods, immortal rank experts didn't have much value. Only by advancing to the demonic rank could one truly experience their true strength. As for the god rank, it was needless to say. Elementary god rank in the entire realm of the gods was a top-notch expert. As long as a sect had a high-level god, that was a god of the underworld king level or above, it could be considered a first-rate force. As for the rebirth realm, currently, there was no news of any force having such a legendary expert. However, no matter if it was the 9 shrines or the 8 ancient families, their ancestors were all rebirth realm experts. This kind of legendary expert had already transcended the category of humans and had become a unique existence. Their influence could be seen from the force they created. It was enough to move unhindered for several eras. Of course, people of that level were still very far away from Yin Nuashing and the others. Now, their only thought was to break through the immortal rank and advance to the demonic rank. Only by advancing to the demonic rank, or even the demonic rank, would they have a place in the future to work hard and create something. Needless to say, since Yao Hua and the others bore the title of future 9 kings, the pressure was also relative. Although Yun Nuoxing had a calm temperament, he also knew the importance of strength to him. Looking at the current situation, any force that jumped out could kill him. Only by advancing to the god rank would he be able to settle down. Although Yun Nuoxing was now at the 11th transformation stage of the immortal rank 5, there was still one more transformation that stumped him. Whether it was forcibly assimilating the heavenly tribulation when he was breaking through or using some small tricks after coming out of seclusion, he did not see any improvement in his strength. If Zai had not told him that he had encountered a breakthrough barrier, he would have thought that there was some problem with his cultivation that caused him to stop moving forward. This breakthrough barrier was something that everyone would encounter on their cultivation journey. As the energy during a breakthrough was too turbulent, it would cause an overload reaction. Most of the time, the energy in the body would be in a state of fullness. At this time, the capacity of the body to hold energy would be much larger than normal, and the energy that could be held would be a little more than normal. However, this was not a good thing, because the breakthrough barrier would cause the energy required to break through to the next level to be many times more than normal. This was like scaling up the capacity of a fish tank and the amount of water in the tank. The gap between the two would become bigger and bigger. However, this breakthrough barrier usually happened at the divine level and rarely at the immortal level. This made Yun Nuoxing rather depressed. The heavens are against you. Who asked you to be so unlucky? The breakthrough barrier that only exists at the divine level has fallen on a puny immortal level like you? Zai could not help but mock him when he learned about the situation. It was also because of this that Yun Nuoxing had no choice but to make a trip to the everlasting night forest. The breakthrough barrier had been established too early, and the impact on him was not small. He had to get rid of it and borrow the night god's spring or something else. If it was not for the so-called 1,000-year seal, such a precious place would probably be occupied and divided by many powerful forces. After all, if they occupied this place, they would be able to nurture generations of outstanding disciples. After Yun Nuoxing and the others had traveled for nearly half a day without resting, a forest shrouded in darkness finally gradually appeared in their line of sight. There was not a single drop of sunlight in the dusky forest. Although there were 2 suns hanging in the sky, the sunlight could not shine in. The edge of the forest formed a clear dividing line with the surroundings. It was dusky inside, making it difficult to see what was inside. Barriers and natural barriers at that. Standing high up in the sky and looking down the forest below, Yun Nuoxing's evil spirit eye automatically revolved. Looking at the millions of gigantic arrays that appeared before him, Yun Nuoxing could not help but feel his scalp go numb. This was the first time he had seen so many arrays revolving at the same time. The complexity of these arrays was not the least bit inferior to the life array that sealed Zai. Most importantly, these arrays were naturally formed and not man-made. But there are so many people here. Looking at the huge sea of people standing at the periphery of the forest, even with Yao Hua and the others' mental fortitude, they could not help but swallow their saliva. People from other regions had really come, but there were so many people here. Yun Nuoxing spread out his hands. He was already used to seeing so many people. Looking around, he kept his 6-winged eagle and chose a secluded place with fewer people. He slowly landed on a tree with good cover. Looking around, he found that there were many people on the trees around. Although the eternal night forest was sealed all year round, there were still its original inhabitants, magical beasts and demonic beasts, living in it. To be honest, no one could say for sure where it was safe and where it was unsafe. After thousands of years, no one knew what had changed inside. Just as everyone was sighing over this grand scene, a clear and loud neigh suddenly resounded from the distant horizon. Immediately, it attracted countless gazes from the surroundings. Yun Nuoxing and the others also looked over, only to see a huge golden snake twisting its body in the distance, quickly flying towards the eternal night forest. The sunlight shone on the golden snake's scales, reflecting a dazzling luster. It was very beautiful. It's actually a golden-striped heavenly snake. This is the Qin family's unique mount, and only people with a relatively high status can have it. Could it be that the Qin family's divine son or divine daughter has come? When the crowd saw the giant golden snake, exclamations of astonishment could be heard. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing and the others were startled, looking at each other for a while. This was because they all felt an aura that they had felt before. It was very likely that the person on the heavenly snake was someone they had seen before. Chapter 429. A gigantic golden snake streaked across the sky. In the blink of an eye, it appeared outside the eternal night forest, bringing with it a gust of wind. For a moment, almost everyone's eyes were focused on the sky. The Qin clan was one of the top clans in the entire divine world. Every single person who walked out of the Qin clan was extraordinary. Yin Nuoxing looked through the branches and leaves. She put her palm on her forehead and looked at the giant golden snake in the sky. She could faintly see a slender and beautiful figure standing on the snake's head. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. She really came. Why didn't Qin Huan come? Only one? Yuan Shi and the others were no strangers to the person who came. They had met once in the Tana's water god temple. She was the goddess of the Qin family, Qin Yin. What surprised them was that the god of the Qin family didn't come. It was a miracle that happened once in 1,000 years. Any young person should have come. Qin Huan, Yin Nuoxing asked curiously. The god of the Qin family. But except for the Qin family, no one knows if this god really exists. After all, we haven't seen him, and there are no rumors about him. While Yuan Shi was murmuring, the giant golden snake in the sky gradually descended. Finally, it stopped 10 feet from the ground, which was only 100 meters away from them. With their eyesight, they could see clearly at this distance. The first thing that came into view was the beautiful figure of the golden-robed woman at the head of the snake. From afar, she exuded an aura of approachability. Her beautiful face was calm and tranquil, and her beautiful eyes were slightly narrowed. The moment Qin Yin appeared, the noisy place seemed to have quieted down. Silence. This was everyone's first impression. It was serene and peaceful. Under the illumination of the sunlight, it appeared beautiful and holy. Compared to this dark and gloomy scene, it was exceptionally prominent. Yin Nuoxing's gaze shifted from Qin Yin to the old man behind her, and he nodded slightly. Although this old man was not as strong as the Metal God King, he was still very powerful. According to Yin Nuoxing's estimation, this old man was at least at the divine underworld or heavenly god level. That's the goddess of the Qin clan. She's as tranquil as a fairy. When I saw her, the energy in my body calmed down. It said that this woman will be the next patriarch of the Qin clan. The Qin clan didn't choose the divine son, but chose her instead. She must have something extraordinary about her. However, I don't see anything special about her. Don't talk nonsense. Be careful that their elders don't blast you away. Hearing the whispers around him, Yin Nuoxing also thought of something. When he was in Tana's water fairy temple, the one who wielded the Qin family's eternal weapon, the royal lotus, was Qin Yin. As for the divine son of the Qin family, he didn't know much about the 8 families, so he had never heard of him. There's still half a day before the seal can be undone. When the time comes, the number of people rushing into the Evernight Forest will probably be much greater than what it looks like. Looking at the dark forest, Yin Nuoxing let out a long yawn and shook her head. Elder Xian, thank you for your trouble. Let's go back first. On the giant snake's head, Qin Yan's golden robes fluttered in the wind. She calmly sized up the sea of people below before turning to the elder beside her. Her crisp voice was very calm, and there weren't any fluctuations in it. The old man behind Qin Yin chuckled. There's no need to rush. It won't be too late to leave after young lady enters. However, young lady, you have to be careful. Aside from our Qin clan, other clans will definitely send people here. This is the Source Peak region. Those old fogies will definitely send the 8 emperors over. If anyone can use this opportunity to break through to the demigod or demigod tier, they will most likely become the #1 youth in the world. It's not that easy to enter the demigod level. Among the people I know, the person with the highest cultivation level should be Sister Qian. However, if we're talking about the strongest, Qin Yin paused for a moment. After a long while, she said strangely, "It should be that na. Yin Nuashing." After saying that, Qin Yan's expression became a little strange. Back at the Tana's water god temple, she couldn't help but mutter, "She seems like a girl." As a result, Yin Nuashing's face immediately darkened. If Yuan Qian hadn't told her that Yin Nuashing wouldn't hold a grudge, she would have chosen to apologize. After all, not everyone was like the chief family, who had the courage to provoke a hedgehog with golden spikes. Befriending her was the best choice. Furthermore, this was also the intention of the Qin family's higher-ups, especially after seeing that Yin Nuashing was getting closer to the Nine Deities Temple. Many powers couldn't sit still. The Nine Deities Temple was already very powerful. Now that they were welcoming Yin Nuashing back, the future, are you talking about the divine body? Indeed, that fellow is an existence that transcends the natural order. Furthermore, the family head and the rest seem to want us to greet him. Isn't that a little too exaggerated? The family head originally wanted you to befriend him, but when did the Qin family? The elder frowned and said slowly, "Elder Xian knows what the family head means, but I can understand that you might not be willing. Yin Nuashing's physical strength and other abilities are far superior to ordinary people. I suspect that his energy has already condensed into a crystal. I've seen him once, and his cultivation level isn't as high as mine. However, I can feel that the energy hidden in his body is enormous. At the very least, it's not something that an immortal can compare to." Qin Yin shook her head and said softly, "Crystal." Hearing this, the elder repeated seriously. Even though he was a god underworld expert, the energy in his body had only condensed into a solid state. If he didn't have a special opportunity, it wasn't very possible for him to condense his energy into a crystal. That's right. It's better to have one more friend than one more enemy, especially this fellow. Young mistress is right. I've become muddle-headed. The elder nodded. The news of Yin Nuashing shattering 3 eternal weapons had already spread throughout the god world. He even crippled the Qi family's second elder. Such a battle record was extremely glorious. Other than having the spiritual divine body, he also has the most powerful light element in the world. Furthermore, it's said that he has the innate dual elemental body. Once such a person grows up, he will be able to overlook the entire world. Many people in the world won't be able to sit still. Therefore, even if the Qin family can't befriend him, we can't follow in the Qi family's footsteps. This fellow's potential has reached a terrifying level, the elder said. Qin Yin nodded and looked around as if she was looking for Yin Nuashing. "Why don't we go and greet him?" Yin Nuashing retracted his gaze from Qin Yin and looked at Yao Hua and the others. Hearing this, Yao Hua was stunned. Just as he was about to say something, he looked at Jining. The latter was also stunned when she met his gaze. Then, she involuntarily looked at Yin Nuashing. However, when she remembered what Jin Jinwang said to her, she retracted her gaze. After hesitating for a moment, she said, "There's no need. Although the Divine King and the others are friends, we're not that close in private. We haven't seen each other that many times." "Oh." Yin Nuashing nodded and turned to look at Yuan Shi. He had just heard Qin Yin mention Yuan Qian. Presumably, they knew each other. We know each other, but we're not that close. Sister should be close to Qin Yin. Let's forget about it." Yuan Shi scratched his head and smiled helplessly. The noble circle is really messy. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. Now that he thought about it, Yuan Qian seemed to know a lot of people. She had acquaintances everywhere. Her interpersonal relationships were really wide. "By the way, who are the Taiyuan 8 emperors?" Yin Nuashing asked. "You don't know?" Yuan Shi couldn't help but glance at Yin Nuashing when he heard this. His gaze was as if he had seen something incredible. Yin Nuashing is a person who doesn't pay attention to outside matters. Yin Nuashing suddenly said proudly, causing everyone to roll their eyes. "The Taiyuan 8 emperors, the Jiyuan 12 divine pillars, the Qinyuan 5 peaks, the Kuan Yuan 6 dark generals, and the 9 kings of our divine prefecture are all ranked together. They are known as the future young supreme masters." Yao Hua said, However, except for the title of the 9 kings of the divine prefecture, which is almost predetermined by the 9 deity temples, the titles of the other 4 origin domains are all obtained through fighting. Every 100 years, there will be a battle for the title of one of the strongest in the origin domain. Moreover, it is said that the last dozen or so young supreme masters selected by the 5 origin domains will ultimately have a battle. Then they will decide what it means. I can't remember clearly, Jining said slowly. The Divine King said the last part unintentionally. He didn't tell us formally. He just told us that we will know in the future. For now, we just need to focus on cultivation, Yao Hua said. However, Yin Tian of the 5 Peaks was defeated by Little Star back then. Thinking back to that day during the Young Heroes competition, Yin Nuoxing, who used the alias of Yusin, defeated Yin Tian in one blow. Mu Ling couldn't help but laugh. Moreover, she was so arrogant back then. That's all there is to it. She made everyone gnash their teeth in hatred. Hearing this, even Hoya and the others couldn't help but laugh. During the battle back then, Yin Nuoxing was forced to fight and then left beautifully. She didn't stop at all. She fought against 2,000 people alone, which was really shocking. Let's not talk about what happened back then. Yin Nuoxing blushed. Back then, he was indeed driven to the brink of insanity. That was why he had no choice but to go up and fight. Although he had completely crushed all the young heroes with the help of the divine artifact, when he thought about it now, he still felt that it was embarrassing. It did not seem like something he would do. The time that followed was spent waiting as usual. However, this wait lasted unexpectedly long. Originally, they thought that the seal would be lifted in half a day, but they ended up waiting for 3 full days. After 3 days, the energy of heaven and earth was suddenly mixed with some rich and strange energy. As soon as that energy appeared, everyone's spirits were lifted. When the energy of heaven and earth changed, Yin Nuoxing and the others, who were sitting cross-legged in the big tree, slowly opened their slightly closed eyes. Everyone looked at each other and slowly stood up. At this time, the boundary that only Yin Nuoxing could see was gradually emerging in front of everyone. The huge forest was like an awakened dragon. A low roar came from the depths of the eternal night forest. Accompanied by this loud noise, the boundary was emerging at an impressive speed. Crash! The appearance of the huge boundary made everyone exclaim. On the huge boundary, the small magic arrays stopped operating one by one. In the end, the entire magic array stopped operating. Crisp cracking sounds were heard, and the crashing sounds were endless. The boundary that shrouded the eternal night forest was also disintegrating rapidly. Along with the collapse of the enchantment, the unique energy tide formed by the eternal night forest also surged out of the forest and rapidly spread out. Some people who stayed in the sky were so scared that they hurriedly retreated from the sky. If they were sucked in by that dark energy, even gods would be twisted half to death. After the huge energy tide surged out of the eternal night forest, it formed a magnificent cloud that traversed the sky and shrouded the area within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. The huge dark energy unceasingly spread out of the eternal night forest. At this moment, many people could feel that the energy in this area was gradually becoming violent and vigorous. Even the power of the dragon veins and stars were rushing over. At this moment, the entire eternal night forest became abnormally chaotic. Chapter 430. Seeing the spectacular energy tide, Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but grin, his heart full of astonishment. With his soul power that was close to the demon rank, he could clearly feel how much energy was contained in that dark energy tide. Is that the eternal night forest? The dark forest he saw after the barrier was broken was a bit different from before, but Yin Nuoxing couldn't pinpoint the specific difference. At this moment, the energy in the eternal night forest had already boiled to an astonishing level. Even if one didn't find a special place inside, one could achieve twice the results with half the effort by just cultivating inside. Moreover, the star power and dragon vein power that were normally difficult to absorb were also being absorbed by the eternal night forest. With the help of these two special energies, one could even condense the energy in one's body. Many people would want to take advantage of this rare opportunity to cultivate star power. Thinking of this, Yin Nuashing couldn't help but lower his head. As expected, he saw that mysterious and vast energy all over his body. The overflowing star power was unceasingly pouring into Yin Nuashing from the outside, making him look as bright as a star. Fortunately, he was on a huge tree, so only Yuan Shi and Yao Hua saw this scene and couldn't help but stare blankly. Zian knew the whole story and couldn't help covering his mouth and laughing. Little Star is lighting up again. Zian couldn't help laughing. Back in Holy Sky City, Yin Nuashing's body was also shining like a light-sucking bug because of the star power that was attracted to Holy Sky City at night. If he went out now, he would definitely attract the attention of thousands of people. In fact, very few people had already noticed that a part of the star power falling from the sky was attracted to the tree, but they didn't think too much about it at this time and just treated it as a normal phenomenon. After explaining to Yuan Shi and the others, everyone understood. Then, Yao Hua and the others couldn't help but laugh. They were also worried. The everlasting night forest was very dark without any light. Yin Nuashing wouldn't be able to hide once she entered. At that time, she would become the focus of everyone. Yin Nuashing shook his head. He wasn't worried about this. The star power that was attracted to him was all because of his physique. He couldn't control it, but he wasn't afraid that someone would come knocking on his door. Looking at the sea of people, Shi Yin smiled with anticipation. He wanted to see if there was anything strange in this dark forest. Moreover, the most important thing was the eternal night flame that Z had mentioned. No one had taken it for dozens of eras. If he was lucky enough to take it, he was curious to see how much it could transform his receiving spirit god body. Boom! While this thought lingered in Yin Nuashing's mind, a wave of chaotic and loud roars suddenly sounded. After which, the enormous sea of people below suddenly rumbled and turned into a stream of people that desperately surged into the forest. Saw it started. Let's go. Yin Nuashing slowly extended the 6 wings on his back and enveloped everyone. Violent wind elements slowly condensed. At the same time, some light elements also rose. Elder Xian, if you don't go back, you can stay outside the forest. I'll go on my own. On the giant snake, Qin Yin looked at the tide-like stream of people and turned her head to speak to the elder behind her. Okay, miss, be careful. Hearing this, the elder immediately nodded his head. Seeing this, Qin Yin smiled gently. The everlasting night forest opened once in 1,000 years. Most of the participants were from the younger generation. This trip wasn't just to improve their cultivation, but also to prove themselves and fight for a position among the younger generation. It was also the best opportunity to prove their talent and strength. Qin Yin tapped the snake's head with the tip of her foot. With a twist of her slender waist, she turned into a ray of golden light and rushed out. In just a few breaths' time, she rushed to the front of the sea of people. Her black hair danced in the wind, and faint starlight shone on her face. That enchanting moment caused a look of amazement to appear in the eyes of many men behind her. TSK. At the same time, dozens of figures appeared at the front of the sea of people. In the blink of an eye, they rushed to the same position as Qin Yin. Qin Yin wasn't surprised by the sudden appearance of these people. Her eyes sized up these figures beside her, and she paid extra attention to them. She also knew that the title of the strongest person among the younger generation would eventually land on the head of one of these people. Boom! Just as these dozens of figures were about to rush into the entrance, a huge ball of light suddenly rushed over with a storm. In just an instant, it flashed over these people's heads. The sudden appearance of the ball of light startled everyone. Then, when they took a closer look, they frowned and some narrowed their eyes. A moment later, the ball of light suddenly dissipated, revealing 6 wings that had expanded to more than 10 meters long. Faint light particles and rich star power rose, causing everyone below to gasp. Damn, who is this guy? He's so ostentatious. He has stolen the prestige of the younger generation's experts. Did you see that? Below the wings, there are the divine prefecture's 9 kings. Among the younger generation, he is the fastest. No one could be faster than the Son of Light. Who was the person leading them? The huge wings suddenly flapped, and a storm suddenly rose. With the help of this wind, Yin Nuoxing led the crowd directly to the ground and landed in the mountain range at the end of the eternal night forest. The 6 wings also trembled and retracted back into her body. When the people behind saw Yin Nuoxing and the others enter first, their expressions changed. Some of them snorted coldly and quickly sped up, turning into streams of light and rushing into the mountain range. In the quiet mountain range, many figures broke through the dark forest and flashed into the mountain range. Yin Nuoxing glanced back and couldn't help but laugh in her heart. Competing with us in speed? What a joke. Are you going to go on your own, or are you going with us? In the forest, the energy had turned into mist. The dark forest was faintly discernible in the mist. Only after entering the eternal night forest did they truly realize how vast this place was. It was extremely difficult to find the eternal night flame. Thinking of this, Yin Nuoxing frowned and looked at Yao Hua and the others. Hearing her question, everyone was stunned. Yao Hua was about to speak, but he looked at Jining. The latter couldn't help but roll her eyes at him and said, "The Divine King wants us to follow you. Then let's go together." "All right." Yin Nuoxing nodded. After the discussion on Yun Nuo planet was completed, dozens of figures also landed in the mountain range. Their gazes paused on the 12 figures in front of them with different intentions. They even paused on that bright figure for a long time. Sensing the slight movement behind him, Yun Nuoxing didn't even turn his head and slowly walked down the mountain. Seeing him like this, the others didn't turn their heads and naturally followed him down the mountain. "Kid, stop. Leave your name." Seeing that everyone was about to leave, someone suddenly shouted coldly. Yin Nuoxing's footsteps paused when he heard the hostile voice. She couldn't help but frown. After thinking for a while, she revealed the seal mark on the upper right corner of her forehead. Her right eye also turned blood red in an instant. Raising her head slightly, she tilted her head to the right and looked at the person who shouted coldly behind her. She laughed evilly and said, "Yin Nuoxing." Seeing Yin Nuoxing's evil face and smile, the person who spoke couldn't help but shudder and hurriedly took a step back. Being stared at by Yin Nuoxing like this, he even felt like he was being stared at by an evil spirit. Even the others turned their gazes away uncomfortably. Seeing that everyone was averting their gazes, Yin Nuoxing smiled and turned her head back. When she turned her head, she withdrew her evil face. Then, she flung her windbreaker and sped up her footsteps, leaving behind a demonic back view. The person who spoke couldn't help but feel an invisible pressure in his heart. His legs went weak, and he almost fell to the ground. Seeing that he was unsteady, his companion beside him quickly reached out to support him. That was why he didn't fall to the ground. Seeing Yin Nuoxing like this, Qin Yin naturally also saw it. For a moment, she forgot to send a voice transmission. Although she didn't completely face that demonic face like that person, she still saw it. She immediately covered her mouth and almost cried out. Yin Nuoxing's original intention was to scare these people so that they wouldn't find trouble with him in the Eternal Night Forest. After all, he would attract people's attention wherever he went. Although he wasn't afraid of people finding trouble with him, he didn't want people to find trouble with him either. At this moment, many people had already entered the mountain range. Hearing the slight movement here, they hurriedly flashed over. When they saw the 12 people who left and the dozens of people behind them, they were all startled. The smell of gunpowder was so strong. What had happened just now? Feeling that more and more people were behind her, Yin Nuoxing's figure moved. The light element carried everyone and rushed down the mountain, leaving behind a bunch of curious and amazed gazes. Light element, 6 devil wings. He has a spiritual divine body. Suddenly, a person who had been staring at the back of the bright figure recognized the characteristics of Yin Nuoxing's body and couldn't help but exclaim. As soon as this remark was made, The surrounding people suddenly turned pale with fright. Even the dozens of people at the front of the line were shocked. The person who had been frightened to the point that his legs turned weak just now even paled. Spiritual divine body? The person who broke 3 eternal weapons in the ghastly forest? Yinuashing? In the mountain range shrouded in fog, many people looked at the black figure rushing down the mountain in horror. Yinuashing's name had spread all over the divine world. Among the younger generation, almost everyone had heard of this name. Breaking an eternal weapon was such a dreamlike achievement that everyone found it hard to believe. Ignoring the various gazes behind her, Yinuashing didn't feel much of a ripple in her heart when she was recognized at this time. She seemed to be used to it. Her figure moved, and the speed at which she rushed into the forest became a little faster. Sigh. In the end, they can't fight. I want to see who is stronger between the person who is known as the #1 physique and the current young experts. Seeing Yinuashing and the others leave just like that, the surrounding crowd couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Hey, it's not the time to fight yet. There are many demonic beasts and monsters in the forest of eternal night. This is a legendary forest. Everyone wants to make a breakthrough here. When they find something good, there will naturally be a fierce battle. After whispering for a moment, everyone dispersed. Some were alone, while others were in groups. All of them headed down the mountain. The dense black fog made maps of little use. Everyone could only slowly rub their hands and try their luck. Waji, help me pay attention to where the fire element is denser. I'm looking for something. As soon as they landed in the forest, Xian took a step forward and said to the crowd. Then, he dragged Yinuashing to the side. The latter shook his head helplessly, looked at Huiji, and said, he guessed that Xian had seen the scene just now. Everyone looked at each other for a while. Looking at the 2 figures leaving, they all smiled bitterly. What's going on? After dragging Yinuashing for a while, Xian put down his hand and quickly turned around after making sure that Yuan Shi and the others couldn't see him. Mei Mao stared at him closely. She gently stroked Yinuashing's right forehead. Knowing what she meant, the former also revealed his original face. The devilish 1/4 of his face made people gasp involuntarily. How did this mark expand? As Yinuashing expected, Xian said that it had something to do with the mark, but he himself didn't know. When he woke up that day, he saw that the mark had expanded a lot. Even his right eye had turned scarlet. He was shocked by himself, so he took it out to scare others. Yinuashing shook his head and said nothing. He just showed a reassuring smile to Xian, telling her that he was fine. Seeing this, Xian also nodded suspiciously. After all, if Yinuashing didn't say anything, she couldn't do anything. He was a guy who liked to show off. When something happened, he always kept it to himself. Who knew whether he was fine or not? Chapter 431. As the crowd dispersed, the quiet forest gradually became lively. It was unknown how many people had entered the eternal night forest this time. The vitality that had been brewing for thousands of years had caused this mountain range, which normally only had a large number of magical beasts, to become lively. And under this lively atmosphere, there was also an unconcealable sense of danger. But with danger came opportunity. The eternal night forest was abnormally rich in energy, which had created the natural treasures that had been growing here for countless years. If one was lucky enough to find them, or find a perfect place to cultivate, then this trip would not have been in vain. In short, this was a battle of luck and strength. As long as one was strong enough, returning with a full load would be easy. In the forest shrouded in dark fog, Yinuashing and the others' figures flashed past. Their eyes swept across the surroundings, and their brows furrowed. This thick fog was mixed with energy that could not be refined. Moreover, ordinary fire elements could not be expelled. Their vision could not reach more than 10 feet, and they were wandering around like headless flies. Their soul power was mixed with fire and wood elements, and it swept across the space like water waves. Then, with the help of the abundant wood elements, they continuously expanded their perception range. Even so, Yinuashing was still leading the way blindly. He flew to the right, stabbed his sword into a dark tree, and then changed to the left. I say this lousy map is completely useless. The only thing we know is that the night god spring is located in the center of the everlasting night forest. But how long will it take to get there if we just blindly wander around like this? Yin Nuoshing stopped and looked at the map in his hand. He scratched his head in distress and threw it to Jining. After pondering for a while, he jumped and appeared on a branch of a huge tree. His eyes swept the surroundings, and he quickly climbed up the branch. After a short while, he finally appeared on the top of the tree. Standing on the top of the tree, Yin Nuoshing narrowed his eyes. The dark fog here was even thicker, and his vision could not reach more than 10 meters. Looking up, the dark energy tide formed a black cloud, and above it, there were stars twinkling in the huge energy. He knew that it was the energy of the stars. An irresistible energy pressure spread out, making his heart palpitate. This won't do. The evil spirit, I can't see anything. This place is really strange. He gently sighed. The everlasting night forest only opened once every 1,000 years. Even the forces who had entered the forest before didn't know what the forest would look like after 1,000 years. The information that Yao Hua and the others had was from 1,000 years ago. It seemed like everyone was wandering around the forest. However, even if it was information from 1,000 years ago, it wouldn't be so different from what it was now. According to the bits and pieces of information, they could still find a vague path. Violet Knight had also said that the flame of eternal night should be at the center. Forget it. Let's just go over. Stroking the divine sun, Bao hanging on his back, Yin Nuoshing shook his head with a bitter smile. If he used the purple night flame to break the mist, others would take advantage of that momentary gap and see the path they wanted to see. He didn't want to sacrifice himself for others. Wait a minute, sighing, Yin Nuoshing nodded and suddenly sat down cross-legged. His enormous soul power once again spread out from his glabella. At the same time, two types of energy, one red and one green, appeared on his body. With the help of the wood element, which was the most abundant in the forest, he strengthened his senses and sensed the place with the rich fire element. Although Yin Nuoshing didn't know where the center of the forest was, as the place where the night god spring had settled down, it naturally required an enormous amount of pure energy. That place would be the place with the most vigorous energy in the everlasting night forest. At the same time, it would also be the source of the energy diffusion. Thus, Yin Nuoshing only needed to sense the direction of the energy flow and explore it in the opposite direction. As the three types of senses rapidly spread out, the traces of energy fluctuations within 100 miles were clearly reflected in Yin Nuoshing's mind. The direction of the energy flow was gradually grasped by him. To the east, so it corresponds to the west. To be precise, it's northwest. 10 minutes later, Yin Nuoshing slowly opened his tightly shut eyes. His gaze first looked to the east, then to the northwest. With his senses fully activated, the direction of the energy flow in this forest seemed to be emanating from the northwest. That obscure and slightly dark energy, the smell of darkness, could it be? Sensing that bit of dark energy, Yin Nuoshing shivered. He was already very familiar with that dark energy. It existed in his shadow. One of the four beasts, primal chaos, emitted this kind of energy that made one's heart palpitate in fear. Don't worry. Although this energy is somewhat similar to the four beasts, if you sense it carefully, you will discover that it isn't. Moreover, you aren't lucky enough to meet them one after another. Sensing the change in Yin Nuoshing's mood, Ziyi promptly comforted him. Then I'd rather be unlucky all the time. Yin Nuoshing rolled his eyes. After finding the vague location, Yin Nuoshing's body leaped backward and directly jumped down from the top of the tree. When he was close to the ground, he suddenly spread his 6 wings. The strong wind that he stirred up allowed his suddenly descending figure to land slowly on the ground. Only then did he withdraw his 6 wings. Yao Hua and the others, who were vigilant of their surroundings, were so frightened that they hurriedly took a few steps back. When Yao Hua and the others saw the familiar symbol, They all heaved a sigh of relief. They couldn't help but scold. Do you dare to make an entrance in a more peaceful way? You freaking scared us to death. Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes. I'm just used to doing this. Why are you blaming me for scaring you? Northwest. That's the source of the energy. The night god spring should be over there. The divine flame. No, no, no. The center of the eternal night forest should be over there. Yes, yes. Yin Nuashing was halfway through his sentence when he suddenly regained his senses and hurriedly changed the topic. Fortunately, his voice wasn't very loud, so the others didn't hear what he vaguely said. Speaking of which, you should take this with you. Thinking of something, Yin Nuashing raised his hand. Rich soul force and light essence rapidly condensed on his palm. In the blink of an eye, 12 thumb-sized golden pearls were condensed. What are these? Yuanshi asked curiously after receiving the pearls that Yin Nuashing threw over. They contain my light essence and soul force. If we get separated, I can use them to sense your location. If there's any trouble, you can also use the light essence contained in them to escape. Yin Nuashing smiled. After doing all this, Yin Nuashing waved his hand and lightly tapped the ground with the tip of his foot. He led everyone and rushed into the dark fog like lightning. Then, he shuttled through the forest at full speed, heading towards the source of the energy that he sensed. Along the way, they discovered many people who were entangled by magical beasts and engaged in fierce battles. Yin Nuashing's group didn't stop for a moment. Enveloped by his light essence, their bodies transformed into light beams, dashing towards the center. Even if they sensed something ahead, they didn't change their course. Under the control of the energy output, Yin Nuashing could still use the light essence at a speed that ordinary people couldn't hope to reach. Thus, on the way, they saved a lot of trouble. On the contrary, when they flew past, the magical beasts and people who were resting were scared to the point that they fled. While hurrying, Jining and the others used the information they got to recognize the similarities between Dian Dian and the others. Yin Nuashing also quickly changed his direction, saving them a lot of unnecessary detours. After chasing at full speed for close to 2 hours, Yin Nuashing's speed finally slowed down. The consumption of light essence was as huge as before. Although he still had some energy left, it couldn't be used for a long time. Yao Hua supported him on the side, but the two of them were almost exhausted. Without any other choice, the whole group could only stop. We're already very deep in. We can sense some tyrannical existences in the surroundings. When they stopped to rest, the wood spirit used the wood element to sense the surroundings, vigilant of the situation around them. As they rapidly went deeper into the forest, the magical beasts and demon beasts hidden in the dark fog had also reached a certain level of strength. If they didn't have the protection of the light essence, a great battle would be inevitable. There were some existences that couldn't be avoided. Fortunately, Little Star has a lot of treasures on him. This time, we should be the first group to enter the night god spring. The 12 of them sat around a huge rock. Jining looked at the silver needle and the Netheruin sword floating in the center and couldn't help but smile. Yeah, if only we didn't have to show off our love. This trip would be perfect. Yuanshi nodded with a bitter smile. They were recovering their strength in the boundary created by Ling Hong Jian and the Netheruin sword. To be more specific, Yin Nuashing and Yao Hua were recovering their strength. The others were just hitching a ride. While they were recovering, Yao Hua was sitting cross-legged on a huge rock. Yin Nuashing, he was leaning on Xian's shoulder, and his hand was even held by Xian's little hand. A faint pink light filled the air, causing Yuanshi to cry out in surprise. Although he knew that Xian was helping Yin Nuashing recover his energy, he couldn't stand the extremely ambiguous atmosphere. It was an atmosphere that made the girls blush and the boys' hearts itch. Don't think too much, I didn't do anything. Yin Nuashing opened his eyes. His slightly pale, handsome face was also slightly red. He was originally sitting cross-legged, but Xian walked over without saying anything. Then, he felt a gentle energy flow through his arm and into his body. Fortunately, this kind of recovery didn't last for too long. In less than an hour, Yin Nuashing finished cultivating. Yao Hua, on the other hand, had finished recovering about 10 minutes ago. His immortal energy had only been condensed to a semi-solid state, and the energy capacity in his body wasn't as large as Yin Nuoxing's. After putting away the two divine swords, Yin Nuoxing once again used the light element to envelop everyone. His feet fiercely stomped on a huge rock, and the bodies of the 12 people turned into thin and long rays of light as they sped away, leaving a long trail behind them as they rapidly dissipated in the air. After his body swept over a huge tree, Yin Nuoxing was just about to accelerate and rush out, but his heart was moved. He suddenly stopped and led everyone to stand on a thick tree branch. His gaze looked in another direction, next to a mountain peak. There, a man and a beast were fighting with all their might. His gaze first landed on the huge magical beast. Yin Nuoxing narrowed his eyes and muttered with some astonishment, "A magical beast of the demonic rank." His gaze paused for a moment on the magical beast, and then turned to the figure under its attack, who was retreating little by little. Someone who could reach this place in such a short time was definitely not a simple person. To be honest, Yin Nuoxing was extremely shocked to see someone here. He used the light element to rush here at a speed 10 times faster than ordinary people. Even if he had rested for an hour, he shouldn't have been caught up. It was a woman. Her bright red dress wrapped around her exquisite and delicate body. Her fine black hair casually draped over her back, reaching her willowy waist. Yin Nuoxing felt that her beautiful and crafty face was somewhat familiar. After a long time, he finally extracted a memory from the depths of his memory, which made him not know whether to laugh or cry. Shinran. A few years had passed, and seeing Yu Yin's best friend again, Shinran, Yin Nuoxing felt somewhat inexplicable. Thinking of her lively and headache-inducing sister, he couldn't help but laugh. The current Shinran had already shed her inexperience of the past. She was less frivolous and mischievous when they first met. She had become more mature, as if she had settled down. The demonic little girl of the past had now matured and become more and more beautiful. With Yin Nuoxing's perception, it was easy to see that Shinran's current strength was at the 8th level of the immortal realm. She was at the same level as Yuan Shi and the others a year and a half ago. It seemed that the position of the core disciple that Yin had left for her had given her a lot of benefits. Moreover, although she was only at the 8th level of the immortal realm, she was able to withstand the attack of the demonic magical beast for such a long time. It seemed that she had some tricks up her sleeves. When Yin Nuoxing arrived here, Shinran's face was slightly pale. The long sword in her hand could barely withstand the attack of the demonic beast. It was very strenuous for her to deal with it, but she didn't panic as she retreated. Judging from the tattered marks around her, it seemed that she had been fighting here for a while. Over time, it was inevitable that she would be defeated. Clang! The sound of metal colliding rang out. Silver sword light flashed, drawing a long arc in the sky. Seeing that Shinran had lost her weapon, the demonic magical beast let out a roar. Its cushion-sized fist fiercely tore through the air and smashed towards the pale-faced Shinran, who was swaying like a flower in the wind. Faced with this fatal blow, Shinran gave up on her futile struggle. Mei Mao slowly closed her eyes, and a heartbreaking sadness appeared on her cunning face. Boom! However, just as the fist was about to come into contact with XN Ran, a sudden burst of golden light tore through the darkness of the forest. The sword light was like a crescent moon as it shot out. As for the magical beast, it was pierced through by the violent energy of the sword light. Its body was also sent flying into the distance by the huge force. Yin Nuoxing quickly put away the nether void sword and turned around. He looked at the originally playful and refreshing face, but now it was so beautiful because of its pallor. He couldn't help but chuckle. Are you all right? Chapter 432. With the voice still ringing in her ears, Shinran's tightly shut eyelashes trembled a few times. Following that, she carefully opened her eyes with a tinge of fear. When she saw the handsome face and not the demon-level demonic beast, she suddenly relaxed. Her legs went limp as she knelt on the ground. She propped herself up with her jade-like hands and took deep breaths. "Are you all right?" Seeing Shinran collapse to the ground, Yun Nuoxing was taken aback. He immediately squatted down and could not help but ask when he saw her pale face. After gasping for breath for a long time, Shinran finally recovered from the shock of death. She looked at Yun Nuo planet in front of her with a strange gaze. Her cheeks flushed with some color. Then she grinned and said, "My name is Shinran. Thank you for saving me, benefactor." Yin Nuoxing could not help but be taken aback when he heard the same refreshing tone as before. He smiled and reached out to help her stand up. He said with a smile, "Are you injured?" "No, I'm just a little weak. I got separated from my friends and came here alone. I couldn't find them. Thankfully, benefactor helped me this time. Otherwise, I would have been dead." Shinran shook her head with a smile. She could not help but clench her fists when she recalled her experience. Yin Nuoxing felt a little uncomfortable with this strange way of addressing her. However, Shinran did not seem to recognize him, so he did not want to point it out. He scratched his head in embarrassment and said with a smile, "Well, don't call me benefactor. I'm Yin Nuoxing. If you don't mind, you can call me Nuoxing." Yin Nuoxing? The legendary, spiritual, receiving divine body? Upon hearing Yin Nuoxing's name, Shinran was extremely shocked as she covered her mouth. Fire Cloud Palace was located in Star Soul City in the Source Peak region. It was quite a distance from the Ghostora Forest. Although they did not participate in the battle, they had heard of what happened. Yin Nuoxing smiled wryly. What the hell was a legend? He did not seem to have done anything that could be considered a legend, right? However, when he was thinking about it, he had neglected the fact that he was able to destroy 3 eternal weapons in the ghastly forest. In the eyes of many people, this was something that only happened in legends. I didn't expect my benefactor to be the divine body of receiving spirit. I will have something to show off to others in the future. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but shake her head. They hadn't seen each other for so many years, but she was still as mischievous and eccentric as ever. Laughing, Shinran suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but murmur, "Eh?" But the spirit receiving divine body, Yin Nuoxing, isn't that our Fire Cloud Palace's superior, the child of divine mandate of the 9 holy temples? Has the news reached here already? Upon hearing this, Yin Nuoxing could not help but smile wryly. He was at a loss for words regarding the way the 9 Hall Masters addressed him. After he was moved to the Fire Divine Hall, he knew of the meeting between the 9 Divine Halls. He never expected that the Fire Cloud Palace, which was a subsidiary of the Fire Divine Hall, already knew of this matter. Of course they know. A year and a half ago, when the 9 Divine Halls met, this matter had already spread to all the factions under the 9 Divine Halls. However, the Grand Elder and Sect Master warned us not to spread the news. Therefore, the outside world still doesn't know of it. Nuoxing, you are the child of divine mandate that the 9 Divine Halls have been searching for all this time, Shinran rattled on. It made Yin Nuoxing's wry smile turn even more intense. "I have to show off when I return. Hee. I was saved by the child of divine mandate." Heh. When Shinran said this, her red tongue licked her red lips. The scene was truly seductive. Let's not talk about this. What are you doing here? You don't look like you don't have the ability to escape. Yin Nuoxing hurriedly diverted the topic. He had an ominous premonition. He didn't know what he would end up talking about if he continued. Speaking of which, Nuoxing, come over here. When she heard Yin Nuoxing mention it, Shinran suddenly became excited. She grabbed Yin Nuoxing's hand and dragged him, whose handsome face was flushed red, towards the mountain wall. When they came close, Yin Nuoxing felt a powerful sword intent. It was as if an ancient divine sword had been placed here. However, when they walked closer, they realized that there were many ancient characters carved on the mountain wall in front of them. Surging sword intent slowly emanated from these ancient characters. Seeing these ancient characters, Yin Nuoxing frowned slightly and couldn't help but murmur, "Yes, this is the sword art left behind by the ancestors." Shinran took a rough look at it. It seems to be a divine-level sword art. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to comprehend it before I was hit by that demonic beast. After saying this, Shinran waved her small fist angrily. It seemed that she was very unhappy that the demonic beast had interrupted her cultivation. Yin Nuoxing's finger gently brushed across the ancient characters. He couldn't tell what era these characters were from. They weren't from the present era, nor were they from the mythological era. They were filled with an indelible sword intent. Fortunately, he could read them with his soul strength. Shinran had brought him here. Her intentions were self-evident. He didn't stand on ceremony and start to look at them. He gently closed his eyes. His soul perception quickly spread out from between his eyebrows and drilled into the stone carvings. As his soul perception spread out, a majestic sword intent was fed back into his mind. Imprints rushed from the stone wall into his heart and were firmly memorized by him. Shinran sat to the side with her hands supporting her chin. She looked at Yin Nuoxing with interest. There was a charming smile on her face. No one knew what she was thinking. Phew! About half an hour later, Yin Nuoxing's tightly closed eyes slowly opened. There was a flash of light in his eyes. He retracted his soul strength from the stone wall. After he retracted his soul perception, a layer of stone powder suddenly fell from the stone wall. The place where the ancient characters were originally had become as smooth as a mirror, as if it had never been there. Ah, why did it disappear? Can't I comprehend it? Shinran stood up in surprise when she saw the stone carvings disappear. She hurriedly moved her face closer to the stone carvings. However, no matter how wide her eyes were, she couldn't see anything unusual about the mirror-like stone carvings. These are imprints. When a complete imprint is comprehended by someone, it will automatically dissipate. Now they are here. Seeing her anxious look, Yin Nuoxing laughed and shook his head. He pointed at his temples and laughed. Phew, I thought they were fake. Then my efforts would have been in vain. Hearing this, Shinran heaved a sigh of relief. Yin Nuoxing couldn't help but laugh bitterly. She was about to die just now, but she still remembered this. This is indeed a divine-level sword art. However, now is not the time to learn it. Yin Nuoxing shook his head with a smile. He extended his finger and gently tapped Shinran's glabella. He transmitted the information he had just obtained to her without any changes. Following that, he said with a smile, "It won't be too late to slowly comprehend it when you return." The information that suddenly appeared in her mind left Shinran slightly taken aback. After taking a quick look, she smiled in delight. This sword art had similarly tempted her. If not, she wouldn't have taken the risk to study it. Hee. Thank you, Star-Lord Nuoxing. Shinran smiled. After all, you were the one who found it first. You can't keep it all to yourself. Yin Nuoxing shrugged and said with a smile, "All right, this is for you." Shinran's eyes rotated. Suddenly, she extended her jade-like finger and pressed it on Yin Nuoxing's forehead, causing him to be stunned. After which, he saw a complete map suddenly appear in his mind. This is the map information that Fire Cloud Palace has gathered. As it's very close, I believe even the 9 divine temples didn't gather as much information as we did. Shinran pursed her lips into a smile and said, "I won't be taking the rest of the path. I just sent the signal. I believe the others will soon follow the energy fluctuations here. Star-Lord Nuoxing, there's no need to bother about me. Go ahead first. The faster we reach the night god spring, the more benefits there will be." With that said, she playfully stuck out her tongue. Yin Nuoxing could not help but laugh. "Are you sure you'll be fine staying here? You aren't putting on a brave front?" Yin Nuoxing asked suspiciously. "I'll be fine. I still have a trump card that I haven't used." Shinran pouted and waved her tiny fists. Yin Nuoxing could not help but roll his eyes as he lampooned inwardly. If she really had a trump card that she had not used, why would she close her eyes and wait for death? However, from her confident look, it did not seem like she was joking. Xian and company were waiting for her in their original spot. Yin Nuoxing could not bring her along, so he left behind a golden bead and told Shinran to use it to escape if there was any danger. Then he turned and left. Holding the energy bead that was still a little warm in her palm, Xian Ran's heart warmed. Looking at Yun Nuoxing's departing figure, her heart could not help but move. She wanted to say something, but she swallowed it back into her stomach. Star-Lord Nuoxing is so powerful. There's no need for me to worry. Yeah. With this in mind, Shinran sat down cross-legged. Not long after she sat down, she sensed a few familiar energies rapidly approaching. Only then did she heave a sigh of relief. Eldest senior sister. Several figures leaped out of the distant fog. Rich, immortal aura lingered around them, and their fiery red robes revealed their identities. They were Fire Cloud Palace disciples. When they rushed out of the fog and saw Shinran leaning against the mountain wall, they hurriedly jumped towards her and bowed reverently. How slow! I've been waiting all day. Upon seeing these people, Shinran placed her hands on her slender waist. Her resentful voice made them smile wryly. Let's leave first. The demonic beasts here already have the strength of a demonic beast. It's not wise to stay here for long. If you want to cultivate, it's safer in the periphery. Shinran waved her hand and said nonchalantly, Yes. A few young female disciples responded respectfully and nodded happily. They tapped the ground with the tips of their feet and rushed towards the outskirts of the everlasting night forest. The other disciples also followed Xian Ran and walked towards the south. Their figures nimbly leaped into the mist and disappeared. After watching Shinran and company leave safely, Yun Nuoxing heaved a sigh of relief. He slowly stood up on a tree branch, and with a kick, he leaped backwards. When Yun Nuoxing returned to Xian and company's side, everyone turned to look at him. They had all sorts of expressions, leaving Yun Nuoxing taken aback. He did not know why their expressions were so odd. Little star, is that your old flame? After watching for a while, Yuanshi could not help but laugh. He asked the question that was stuck in everyone's throat. Puffed. Upon hearing that, Yun Nuoxing spat out a mouthful of water. His cheeks twitched for a long while. When everyone saw his expression, they were taken aback. Could they have guessed wrongly? What old flame? That's elder sister Yu Yin's best friend. She met her when she was still in Fire Cloud Palace. She only met her once. After a long while, Yun Nuoxing waved his hand with a wry smile and said, However, the one she knew was Yusin. She didn't know me. Back then, elder sister kept teasing me and even made me look like a girl. Speaking of this half-black, half-white history, Yun Nuoxing's face darkened. Back then, in order to avoid being searched by the 9 deities temple and the 2 great families, Yu Yin had played a dirty trick on him. She had forcibly made him look like a girl, resulting in the matter of the Taiyuan goddess. Xin secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As for everyone else, they looked enlightened. You even dressed up beautifully back then. Yao Hua could not help but laugh when he recalled what had happened in the past. You darn cocky fart. I'll definitely kill you this time. Upon hearing him mention it, Yun Nuoxing instantly bristled like a cat. His 3,000 black strands of hair stood on end in anger as potent purple night flames burst out of his body. Seeing Yun Nuoxing on the brink of going berserk, Jining and company tactfully pushed Yao Hua away. Then, they pulled Xian and Yuan Shi and hurriedly retreated a distance away. Just as they found their footing, they saw a purple figure flash in front of them like a beam of light. I was wrong, but... No. Don't hit my face. My grandfather. Puffed. Cough, cough. Upon hearing the chaotic cries behind them, everyone silently sat down on the tree branches. They looked up at the invisible moon and sighed. They could not help but mutter, sigh. It's a daily death-seeking series. This illness is incurable. Scram. I don't have a good-for-nothing grandson like you. Yun Nuoxing roared with a sinister smile, causing the surrounding leaves to fall. Chapter 433. Seeing Yu Xian leave, Yun Nuoxing and the others continued on their journey. After casually teaching Yao Hua a lesson, they remembered that they would need his light essence later, so they unwillingly showed mercy. When Jining and the others saw Yao Hua's appearance, They couldn't help but look away. Yao Hua's miserable appearance was truly the first time they had seen it in all these years. After Yao Hua recovered from his injuries, everyone left the tree branch where they had rested for a while and continued to rush towards the depths of the ghost forest. After hurrying to a certain distance, Yin Nuoxing and Yao Hua both stared blankly at the same time. The speed of the entire team suddenly slowed down, and the light particles surrounding them decreased by a lot. Everyone's silhouettes gradually became visible from the slender light. The light element has been suppressed. Yin Nuoxing frowned, shaking his head and sighing for a while. He had just sensed an indescribable aura that covered a very large area. Moreover, it seemed that it wasn't just the light element that was suppressed, but the other elements as well. They could only use less than 60% of their original elemental power, and, among them, the most suppressed element was the light element. Without the protection of the light element, everyone lost their previous relaxed journey. The magical beasts that appeared in the surroundings were already tyrannical to a terrifying degree. Fortunately, Yin Nuoxing's entire body was full of treasures. When the light element lost its effect, he took out all the weapons on his body. With a divine artifact in each of his hands, he could be said to be able to kill gods. It was a pity that those magical beasts that had been unhindered in the magic realm all their lives, sweeping everything before them, had met someone they shouldn't have met. However, their speed had slowed down a lot. On the way, Yin Nuoxing even changed his path a few times, suddenly dashing left and right, causing everyone to be somewhat astonished. The map he had obtained from Yu Xian Ran relied on energy sensing to guide the way. Many of the places they passed by could be matched on the map, but the energy flow he sensed was not quite the same as the direction he was heading. He didn't know which one was the correct one. At this time, Yin Nuoxing was hoping that someone would know the way and lead them to the Night God Spring. He was already confused by the energy sources that came and went from left to right. Everyone was also confused as they were led around by him. They thought that he had sensed some danger and changed his path. At this moment, Yin Nuoxing and the others were probably at the front line. After seeing Shinran, they did not see anyone else. Instead, they saw quite a number of demonic beasts. Among them, the 2 demigod-level demonic beasts were the most prominent. Unfortunately, they bumped into Yin Nuoxing, who was in a fit of rage. Everyone only knew her for a second before 2 graves appeared on the ground. Yin Nuoxing still had this habit. After killing demonic beasts and demonic beasts, regardless of whether their corpses were still intact, she would dig a grave for them. Along the way, countless graves of various sizes were erected. Everyone seemed to be infected by this habit. Towards the end, after killing a demonic beast, they naturally left a grave for themselves. Who knew what the future generations would think when they saw these graves? Time also passed quickly as Yin Nuoxing and the others charged and killed their way through the graves. Not long after, the entire world became extremely dark. The fog in the eternal night forest also became thicker. The little fireflies in the forest also quietly dimmed. Later on, the visibility was even less than 5 meters. If they walked a little further, they would not be able to see anyone else. They could only walk close to each other. As night fell, the demonic beasts in the eternal night forest became more active. Long, terrifying, and mournful roars echoed in the forest one after another. The frequency of Yin Nuoxing and the others digging the graves also increased by a lot. If it weren't for Yin Nuoxing's escort, perhaps everyone would have dozens of scars on their bodies. Along the way, they had killed no less than 100 demonic beasts. If Yao Hua and the others had come alone, they would have to stop at the first part of the journey. Only Yao Hua, this green chicken, could move up and down in the eternal night forest so unscrupulously. Although they relied on the more clear energy flow as a beacon, everyone still lost their way in the forest. They were brought along by Yun Nuo planet and did not know where they had crashed into. However, there was one thing that did not need to be doubted. They were gradually approaching the center. The surrounding energy was so dense that one could pinch out a handful of water. While walking in a daze, everyone unexpectedly rushed into a place filled with dense energy. It was a cliff. Here, the entire terrain suddenly rose from the ground, abruptly raising the altitude by 1,000 meters, making it look like a valley below. And on this cliff, there was a huge waterfall. The waterfall was 10 meters wide and splashed down from 1,000 meters high. Faint purple energy mist filled the air. The river above the waterfall wasn't water, but energy. A waterfall condensed from energy, TSK, TSK, TSK. Standing at the lake below the waterfall, Yaohua couldn't help but click his tongue in praise. This was an extremely dense energy, pure energy that could be directly absorbed into the body. I feel that the rest of the journey will be easy. Yin Nuoxing gently brushed his palm across the faint purple lake. He raised his hand and rubbed it a few times. Feeling the rich energy, he couldn't help but smile. The water of this waterfall should be the diluted night god spring. It's flowing from a night god spring? Doesn't that mean we just have to go with the flow? Hearing this, Yuanxi was a little excited. Yin Nuoxing smiled and nodded. She couldn't be wrong about the energy that had a hint of darkness. Although it was diluted countless times, she could still clearly feel it. Congratulations, everyone. Your mission objective has been achieved. At this moment, right here, take a bath, and you will be able to take 2 more steps forward in your life, helping you reach the peak of your life. Take a bath, and you won't be at a disadvantage, nor will you be fooled. Don't miss this opportunity. What are you waiting for? Yin Nuoxing suddenly pointed at the waterfall boldly, her expression passionate and proud as she announced loudly. Black lines appeared on everyone's faces. Why was she advertising all of a sudden? So, feeling several pairs of disdainful gazes, Yin Nuoxing sighed softly and shook her head. Then, she suddenly opened her eyes, grabbed all 11 of them, and threw them into the lake. She roared, "If you don't take a bath now, when will you?" Before they could recover from the state of listening to the advertisement, the group of people felt their feet leave the ground. The wind swiftly swept past them, and a sense of weightlessness spontaneously arose. Soon after, they saw a faint purple color rapidly magnifying in their eyes. Plop. The 12 of them played around in the diluted lake of the night god Spring for a long time before they slowly came ashore. After drying their clothes, they cultivated for a while. Just as Yin Nuoxing said, everyone was strengthened by the strange energy, and their cultivation had smoothly increased by 2 revolutions. Of course, except for Yin Nuoxing, he was deeply immersed in breaking through the barrier and was unable to extricate himself. When everyone finished cultivating and saw Yin Nuoxing climb out of the lake wet and did not even let out a fart, they could not help but burst into laughter. Regarding this, Yin Nuoxing could only sigh softly. Who asked her to be so skilled? Due to the discovery of this lake, the journey that followed was much easier than before. Although they could sense the appearance of magical beasts in the surroundings, their strength was gradually increasing, and many of them were extremely difficult to deal with. What was more worrying was that the further they went, the stronger the suppression of the elemental power became. It was already not bad if they could exert 50% of the power of ordinary elements, but it was difficult for the light element to exert even 30% of its power. Regarding this, Yin Nuoxing and Yaohua could not do anything. The information they received did not mention what this elemental suppression was. In the second half of the journey, some of the magical beasts that appeared were close to the peak of the demigod level, and there was a faint pressure that belonged to the gods. It seemed that they were not far from that level. But this was not a difficult matter for them, who had almost lost the protection of the light element. With a divine artifact in hand, they raised their hands and slashed down, turning everything into nothingness. But what made everyone even more astonished was that they saw people passing by, or rather, people being overtaken by them. It would be a lie to say that they were not shocked. How much effort did they put in to take the lead by such a large distance? Now, they were being overtaken so easily. Although they had played in that lake for a relatively long time, it should not have been so easy for them to catch up, right? But after sensing the aura of those people at close range, everyone calmed down. Those were all powerhouses of the demigod level. Although they were not as fast as light elementals, They would be able to catch up with Yin Nuashing and the others if they spent some time. But as they continued to follow the river and went deeper into the forest, the figures in the surroundings became scarce again. After seeing the first powerhouse of the demigod level, Yin Nuashing and the others only saw two people. These two people were very strong, both at the demigod level. When they discovered them, the two of them were fighting fiercely with a demigod-level magical beast. However, with the Netherworld Ruins sword concealing their aura, the two of them did not discover their tracks. So after watching for a while, everyone quietly left, and time passed quickly as the group rampaged along the way. As the sky outside completely darkened, the originally dark forest became even darker. Yun Nuashing calculated the time and estimated that it was already midnight. This kind of environment was already extremely unsuitable for traveling. It was likely that even those experts who had a clearer route would stop at such a time. After an entire day of traveling and fighting with magical beasts, all of them had expended quite a bit of energy. If they did not take this opportunity to quickly recover, it was likely that they would not be able to smoothly reach the Night God Spring. Not everyone could be like Yin Nuashing's group, who could travel as they pleased. But in the face of such a vile environment, they muttered to themselves for a while and chose to stop and rest for the time being. Now that they had found the way to the Night God Spring, their speed was definitely faster than the majority of people. Therefore, it was good to stay and rest for a while. There was still a certain amount of danger in traveling at night. Moreover, the light element suppression was almost at its limit. They could only use less than 20% of it now. No matter how hard Yin Nuashing tried, it was difficult to increase their speed. Now, they had to use other methods. After resting for nearly half an hour, Yin Nuashing slowly opened her eyes. Once again feeling the abundant energy in her body, she heaved a sigh of relief. When she raised her head, she saw that everyone was staring at her. Yaohua had also rested long ago and was just waiting for this big shot. Hey, get up and continue walking. It's not good to travel at night. Now, we have to use other methods. She stood up with a light exclamation. Yin Nuashing patted her butt and smiled at everyone. With a flip of her arm, the Netherworld Ruin sword appeared in her hand. She squeezed it hard and the barrier slowly expanded. When it completely enveloped everyone, she waved her hand and slowly flew towards the upper reaches of the river. She let go of the Netherworld Ruin sword and let her float at the side. Seeing this, everyone looked at each other strangely for a while, then hurriedly followed. During the night, Yin Nuashing stopped to rest many times. The Netherworld Ruin sword's barrier consumed too much energy, and her small body couldn't bear it. If she only used it on the spot, it wouldn't consume so much energy. But now, she was hurrying along with the barrier, and in order to cover everyone, she had to expand the range by quite a bit. The consumption immediately increased by several times, and in this laborious journey, there were 3 or 4 people who were overtaken by Yun Nuashing's group. Judging from their auras, they were clearly demon rank powerhouses. This made them feel astonished. They didn't expect that there would still be people ahead of them. However, they were inside the barrier and weren't seen by anyone. As the sky gradually brightened, the magical beasts that were abnormally active at night finally gradually retreated. At the same time, the roars of the beasts in the mountain range also weakened by quite a bit. There was a towering ancient tree beside the river. Yin Nuashing brought everyone and landed on top of it. He grabbed at the air in front of him, and the dense energy contained in the dark fog turned into a pool of water that landed on his palm. Shock appeared on his face. The energy here is already so dense. I really don't know how terrifying the energy in the Night God Spring is. Logically speaking, we should be arriving soon. Yin Nuashing muttered in a low voice. The surrounding energy was emitting a faint, dark aura. In that case, they should be arriving at their destination soon, right? The corners of Yin Nuashing's mouth curled up slightly, and a relaxed smile appeared on her handsome face. Just as she was about to lead everyone to move, her ears suddenly trembled. Not far to her right, there was the faint sound of swords clashing and energy exploding. She glanced to her right, and then withdrew her gaze. Along the way, She had seen many such situations. She wasn't a saint and didn't have the strength or time to help. She immediately shook her head, and the tip of her foot tapped on a tree branch to continue forward. But the moment she moved, the sound of energy exploding became much more intense. Feeling that familiar energy, her figure that was about to dash out instantly froze. In particular, when he heard a clear and moving woman's cold shout, a look of astonishment and sluggishness appeared on his handsome face. This voice was beautiful and peaceful, with a hint of tranquility. Yin Nuashing was unfamiliar with this voice and tone. He had heard it when he came to the Eternal Night Forest. Unable to stabilize himself, he staggered and almost fell into the fog. Xian and Yuan, she quickly pulled him back, and they were also shocked by his strange expression. Using all his strength to support himself against the tree trunk, Yin Nuashing stiffly raised his head and fiercely sucked in a breath of air. One of his hands twitched as he clenched his fist. On his forehead, green veins popped out, causing everyone to jump in fright. A slightly familiar name came out of his mouth with some hidden bitterness, causing the few of them to be startled. Qin Yin. Chapter 434. In the open space beside the dark river, specks of light were emitted from the forest, causing the area to appear extremely bright. The dark fog had been slightly blown away in the previous great battle. Hence, the sight in this area had become much clearer. In the open space, there were several figures. 4 men and 1 woman. Their auras were not weak. Clearly, they were not weak. Of the 4 men, one of them was wearing gray clothes. There was a shallow scar on his face that extended from his right eye to his cheek. He was standing on a tree branch with his back against a tree trunk. His arms were crossed as he lazily looked below. As he yawned, he said, "Be quick. Don't be discovered by others." When the 3 men in the open space heard this person's words, they immediately nodded their heads. These 3 people were also wearing gray robes. The 4 of them had the same emblem embroidered on their chests. It seemed that they belonged to the same faction. Hand over the guiding pearl. We don't want to provoke the people of the Qin family. However, there are very few people here. I don't mind destroying a flower. The woman held a long sword in her hand. Her pale golden robes completely wrapped around her exquisite and delicate body. Although it was a little messy, it also had a unique aura. On her quiet and beautiful face, there was a little tiredness and vigilance. She looked exactly like the Qin Yin that Yin Nuashing had seen twice. As if she sensed that these people were not joking, Qin Yin frowned slightly. Mei Mao continued to calmly stare at the 3 people in front of her. Her delicate hand tightly gripped the long sword. A sharp aura slowly surged out. 2 calm words were softly spat out from her mouth. "Don't even think about it." Hee, as expected of the young miss of the Qin family's next generation. However, you're a little ignorant. With your strength at the peak of the Immortal 9, don't even think of escaping from the 3 of us. Obediently hand over the guiding pearl. Otherwise, I don't mind sending a beautiful head to the Qin family. Qin Yan's pretty face remained calm when she heard these threatening words. The 3 people in front of her were all around the 9th level immortal stage. She was confident that she could kill all 3 of them in a short period of time. However, the biggest problem was the person on the tree branch who looked extremely lazy. She had suffered a loss when the 4 of them joined forces earlier. The person who gave her a little pressure was around the same level as her. The Sacred Weapon Divine Palace is so impressive. When they heard Qin Yin directly mention the forces they belonged to, their faces darkened. The man who had been standing on the tree branch also narrowed his eyes. The symbol of the Sacred Weapon Shrine had always been covered by the latter's aura. Unexpectedly, it was still recognized. If Qin Yin escaped at this time, there would be a big problem in the future. Attacking the future successor of the Qin family was enough to make the Qin family go crazy for revenge. Guiding Pearl. Hearing this new term, Yin Nuashing raised his head and looked at Jining and the others. Coincidentally, the latter and the others also looked over curiously. This made him stunned. Do they think that he knew? It's probably something from the Qin family. We don't know either. Yuanshi shook his head. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing rolled his eyes. His eyes were slightly cold as he looked at the four people. Even the elements on his body were restless. He muttered, "It's actually someone from the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace. Since he dared to attack the future successor of the Qin family, that guy must have a high position in the Sacred Weapon Divine Palace. He might even be someone at the level of a god." Jining frowned and looked at Yin Nuoxing, who was indifferent. After thinking for a while, she said, "What do you plan to do?" With his elbows on the tree trunk and his fists on his head, Yin Nuoxing thought for a while and shook his head. Everyone thought that he was going to ignore them and leave. Just as they were about to move, they heard him say, "Let's wait and see." Everyone looked at each other and rolled their eyes. Feeling the chill coming from behind them, the three of them shuddered. Their eyes met for a moment before they nodded slightly and decided not to show any mercy. Their figures blurred as they surrounded Qin Yin in a triangular formation. Silver metal elements violently gushed out from their bodies. Sacred weapon, domain seal. The three of them fiercely slammed their palms together. Immediately, silver energy surged rapidly and gathered in the sky. In the span of a few breaths, for gigantic metal swords appeared in the air and pierced into the ground, trapping Qin Yin within them. Seeing this, Qin Yin frowned. She raised her hand that was holding the long sword and slashed it in front of her. A sharp sword aura shot out and touched the metal sword lightly, causing the latter to shatter. With the sudden shattering of a metal sword, the entire array collapsed quickly. Before it could be fully activated, the three people looked at each other and clenched their fists. Three silver spears formed from metal elements were formed and were held by the three of them. They stomped their feet on the ground and charged directly at Qin Yin in the center. Facing the attacks of the three Immortal Nine experts, Qin Yin did not even look. She stepped to the left and turned her body. The long sword in her hand still slashed horizontally. Swoosh! The four figures exchanged blows in the sword domain like lightning. Sword aura flew everywhere, leaving deep trenches in the ground. The three men seemed to know that Qin Yan's sword aura was fierce, so they did not choose to attack forcefully. Instead, they slowly depleted the latter's immortal qi. Perhaps it was because they were in the sword domain, but Qin Yin felt that the long sword in her hand was not under her control. She also knew that the three people were exhausting their attacks. She did not use much strength. Every time she blocked, she only used just enough energy. Moreover, as she was at the peak of the Immortal Nine, the immortal qi in her body was much more than the three of them. After a while, the three of them began to struggle. If this continued, the three of them would not be able to hold on and would be killed one by one. Clang! Clang! The long sword pierced the three spears like lightning. Qin Yin took a deep breath, and a sharp sword aura suddenly shot out. Boom! After being hit by the three sword auras that shot out at almost the same time, the three elemental spears suddenly exploded. At this moment, Qin Yin stomped her feet on the ground and launched her first counterattack. However, as soon as Qin Yin dashed out, the long sword in her hand began to vibrate violently, startling her. Before she could stabilize her long sword, the space in front of her trembled slightly, and a gray figure suddenly flashed out and slammed a palm toward her. The sudden attack caused Qin Yan's pretty face to turn slightly cold. She couldn't care less about the violent sword in her hand. She freed one of her slender hands, surrounded by immortal qi, and met the large bronze hand with her palm. Boom! A dull sound of collision rang out. Qin Yan's delicate body trembled, but it was not obvious. Her slender hand touched the ground, and she quickly retreated. On the other hand, the person who had launched the sneak attack was not affected at all because he had made the first move. By the time Qin Yin landed on the ground, the three people in front of her were already charging towards her with new spears in their hands. Furthermore, the man in front of her was also charging towards her with a silver axe in his hand. Stubborn bastard. Although I am also listed among the young, strong cultivators, if no one helps me, I am afraid I will have to fight hard. However, this is the end. Since you have seen through us, you can only die. Path. 1. Path. When they saw that Qin Yin was still unwilling to obey, the four people finally became impatient. They gritted their teeth and laughed evilly. The man with the broad axe rushed to a foot in front of Qin Yin in a breath's time. The other three people's palms faced each other from a distance. Three silver-white energy pillars suddenly burst out and turned into a circle of light that surrounded the three huge iron swords. Divine weapon array, spirit sealing technique. The three people shouted. The metal elements and immortal qi quickly condensed in the area surrounded by the three iron swords. The powerful energy gathered by the three people made Qin Yan's expression change. What shocked her even more was that the long sword in her hand showed signs of being broken down into metal molecules. As the shout fell, the silver-white immortal qi quickly condensed and turned into thousands of small iron swords in the sealed area. With a whoosh, the many rays of light condensed into a thick white light and shot straight towards Qin Yin. Along the way, thousands of marks appeared on the ground, as if a field had been plowed. Dying, looking at the many iron swords shooting towards her, and then looking at the man in the sky with a powerful aura, Qin Yin relaxed. Her tensed body suddenly deflated and became limp. What was she trying to do? Yin Nuoxing frowned when she saw Qin Yin's actions. She relaxed during a battle. Did she want to die? However, just as Yin Nuoxing thought that Qin Yin was going to wait for her death and was about to rush to her rescue, the latter suddenly raised her lily-white hands and slowly formed a few hand seals. Then, a clear word slowly came out of her mouth. Jia. As the word fell, the four people from the Divine Weapon Palace suddenly felt their hearts skip a beat. They were not the only ones. Even Yin Nuoxing, who was in the distance, felt that something was wrong. Her eyes suddenly widened, and then she sucked in a breath of cold air. Retreat! Yin Nuoxing hurriedly shouted. Light elements rushed out, and she pulled Xian and Yuan Shi with one hand. The light elements wrapped around the dumbfounded people, and then she quickly retreated into the distance. Yin Nuoxing's strange actions confused Jin Ying and the others. However, Xian and Yin Nuoxing knew that if Yin Nuoxing said that there was a problem, then there really was a problem. Seeing that both of them trusted her, although Jin Ying and the others were a little confused, they immediately reacted and hurriedly ran after them. The moment Yin Nuoxing and the others moved, thousands of iron swords and the giant axe with a little flame unexpectedly arrived. At the same time, a power that seemed to have awakened from a deep sleep slowly spread out from Qin Yan's body. Boom! Golden divine qi burst out from Qin Yan's delicate body. The thousands of iron swords violently collided with the golden light. The corrosive power contained in the golden energy dyed the iron swords golden. Then, under the shocked gazes of the three people, the iron swords were broken down into energy molecules and merged with the golden light. As the thousands of iron swords dissolved, the golden divine qi on Qin Yan's body became more and more solid. Even the energy in the divine weapon great array was slowly being eroded. Oh no, retreat quickly. The person holding the giant axe reacted quickly. The moment he sensed the golden divine qi devouring his energy, a hurried roar came from his mouth. At the same time, he swung the giant axe behind him. Using the giant axe's huge weight, he stopped his body from moving forward and then retreated at lightning speed. The person's reaction was fast, but the three people in charge of the array were slower. Therefore, after being stunned for a while, they began to use their movement techniques to quickly retreat. However, it was already too late. Just as they were about to retreat, Qin Yin, who was surrounded by the golden immortal qi, raised her head slightly. Golden patterns appeared on her fair skin, and then two balls of dazzling golden flames appeared in her eyes. Divine word cross. As the golden energy continued to condense and compress, Qin Yin slowly raised her head, and a clear and melodious voice suddenly burst out of her mouth like a clap of thunder. The golden energy that had been compressed to the extreme finally exceeded the range of Qin Yan's control. In an instant, it emitted a substantial energy ripple. In an instant, like a storm, it swept out with lightning speed with her as the center. Boom! The first to be affected by the energy storm were naturally the three people who had slow reactions. The golden storm caught up with them in an instant. Soon after, their bodies were like sandbags that had been hit by a cannonball. With a bang, they instantly burst apart, turning into a bloody mist that dissipated into the golden light. The person holding the giant axe did not escape the attack range of the golden storm. However, he was powerful and his reaction was fast enough. Therefore, he did not explode into a bloody mist like the other unlucky fellows. However, when the storm swept over, it still caused the blood in his body to churn. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of fresh blood. Clearly, he had suffered serious injuries. Meanwhile, Yin Nuoxing and the others, who had fled far away, gazed at the golden storm that was gradually rising into the air and eventually forming a cross that was several hundred meters tall. Even from afar, it was extremely spectacular. Even the dark mist had mostly dissipated, and they couldn't help but wipe away the cold sweat on their foreheads. Qin Yin, that girl is going to self-detonate. Why self-destruct? Qin Yin is still fine. How could Yin Nuoxing not know what they were thinking when she saw Yao Hua's pained expression? She rolled her eyes, and her eyes turned purple gold. She looked at the bottom of the golden cross, where a graceful figure was standing. But what's with the golden lines? Could it be the same as my divine spiritual body? Yin Nuoxing frowned as she looked at the lines on her body. Chapter 435. It should be a secret technique unique to the Qin family. I can feel that Qin Yan's strength has increased a lot. It seems that she already has the strength of a half-demon. Shui Xia, who was most sensitive to formations and secret techniques, said, "I'm afraid that this explosion will consume all of her strength. After all, she has been forced to this point. Even if she is an expert of the same level, she won't be able to withstand being ganged up on by so many people." Yuan Shi sighed and shook his head. That's not necessarily true. Hearing this, Yin Nuoxing grinned and pointed his finger at himself, as if pointing something out. "You're not human. Don't squeeze into our territory to talk." Everyone scolded angrily. "Aha!" Yin Nuoxing laughed heartily. As the golden cross gradually dissipated, Qin Yin raised her head. Her originally pitch-black eyes were now tinged with golden light, and 6 golden patterns could be seen on her delicate cheeks. Like scratches, they made her look even more wild and unruly. She raised her beautiful eyes and looked in the direction where the last person flew out. With a wave of her jade-like hand, the long sword from before automatically flew back to her. She held it in her hand. Golden energy circled around the long sword. Threads of sword chi blended with the immortal chi and turned into solid ripples that spread out. Bang! Not far away, the place where the boulders were buried suddenly exploded. Then, a gray figure rushed out. Looking at his appearance, it was naturally the last person. His clothes were ragged, but there were no obvious wounds on his body. It seemed that he didn't suffer any real injuries. As soon as this person appeared, he paused for a moment and flew into the air. He looked down at Qin Yin, who was holding a long sword, and his eyes slowly turned cold. The 4 of them ganged up to bully a girl and ended up like this. If this news spread, they would definitely become a laughingstock. The Qin family's secret technique can last for a long time. This battle will definitely consume a lot of my energy. It seems that I won't be able to get the guide bead. However, he was also a smart person. He knew the purpose of coming here. Naturally, he didn't want to waste his energy fighting here. This battle had used up all of Qin Yan's strength, so they had one less competitor. Oof. After a moment of thought, the scarred man let out a cold snort and glared at Qin Yin. Qin Yin looked back at him. She knew what he was thinking, and she knew that he must have been injured by her attack just now. The scarred man laughed sinisterly. In the end, he glanced at Qin Yin. His figure retreated and landed in the gradually gathering dark fog. A voice was slowly emitted. Hey, although I didn't obtain the guiding bead this time, I've also made you lose the right to compete for it. Let's forget about today's matter. I'll head to the night god's spring first. As for the guiding bead, Qin Yin sneered in disdain as she watched the man disappear. The guiding bead was related to another matter, so there was no way she was going to hand it over. After waiting for a long time, seeing that he didn't turn around to kill her, Qin Yin really relaxed completely this time. The golden lines on her body slowly faded away, and the power in her body also disappeared like a receding tide. What replaced it was a sense of powerlessness, causing her beautiful face to pale, her delicate body to sway, and even her head to feel dizzy. This won't do if I collapse here. However, she persevered and didn't fall. She placed her sword on the ground. They were already deep in the eternal night forest, and there were magical beasts roaming around. There were even demigods. If she collapsed in such a weak state, she might never be able to open her eyes again. Rustle. Just as Qin Yin heaved a sigh of relief, she heard footsteps behind her. Her pupils abruptly shrunk. Ignoring the weakness in her body, she hurriedly pulled out her long sword and abruptly turned around. This violent movement caused her to stagger 2 steps back. However, when she clearly saw who it was, her small mouth opened in shock, and the hand holding the long sword trembled. A long time no see. Yun Nuoxing couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of Qin Yin acting like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. After the end of the battle, they had also come over from afar. The group of 12 looked at Qin Yin calmly and greeted her symbolically. It's you. After clearly seeing who it was, Qin Yin and Mei Mao's eyes flickered. When they first saw him, they were a little uneasy. They were afraid that the former would do something at this time. However, when they saw Yun Nuoxing's warm and gentle appearance, the nervousness in their hearts subconsciously dissipated. After looking at the place where the scarred man disappeared, Yun Nuoxing looked at Qin Yin. For a moment, she actually didn't know what to say. Even Yuan Shi and Jining stared blankly at the sky. The atmosphere was very awkward. Qin Yin also felt a little uncomfortable with such a silent atmosphere. Her left hand clasped the wrist of her right hand, and her eyelids drooped slightly. She didn't know what to say. Before I left the Qin family, Master asked me to send his regards to you. After a long silence, Qin Yan's pale face turned slightly red. Finally, she took the initiative to break the silence. However, her voice was very low. Then help me tell the patriarch of the Qin clan that thanks to him, the younger generation is doing well. I wish him the best. Yun Nuoxing scratched his head and finally squeezed out a sentence. Hearing this, Qin Yin nodded and then lowered her head again. Yun Nuoxing also looked away. She's silent. This is so awkward. Could it be that little star doesn't know how to communicate? She can't even speak. Yeah, she's usually very smooth with her words, but now she's silent. Seeing Yun Nuoxing looking around unnaturally, Jining and the others looked at each other and began to whisper among themselves. Although their voices were very low, Yun Nuoxing still heard them. Her face instantly turned green and red. Ahem. After a moment, Yun Nuoxing coughed loudly. Everyone hurriedly stopped their discussion. Only then did he shake his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He looked behind him and said, "That, Sister Mu Ling, help her. Let's continue walking." Hearing this, Qin Yan's face instantly flushed red. Mu Ling shrugged at everyone and hurriedly walked forward to help the former. Qin Yin turned around awkwardly for a while, then let nature take its course. Seeing that the two of them were done, Yun Nuoxing nodded and a faint light element surged out. Yao Hua also gritted his teeth and released the light element, enveloping everyone. Then, they turned into a ray of golden light and flew along the river at the side. How you guys so fast? You actually reached this place before us. Yun Nuoxing finally asked on the way. Upon hearing his words, Qin Yin, who was gradually recovering with the help of the wood spirit, looked up at him with her beautiful eyes. Then, She lowered her head and looked down at the dark-colored river that was rapidly moving below them. "You're going the wrong way, huh?" Hearing this, Yin Nuashing turned his head in shock. The light element fluctuated along with him, and the sudden drop in speed almost caused everyone to bump into each other. Most people follow the flow of energy they sense, but the water flowing out of the night god spring flows for thousands of miles through the forest of eternal night, forming small ponds in many places. The enormous amount of energy condensed in those ponds will form a new flow of energy that interferes with one's judgment. Therefore, you might have gone to a pond that is relatively far from the night god spring. As for me, the Qin family has a unique way of determining which energy flow is the real one, so, after hearing Qin Yan's words, Yin Nuashing sucked in a breath of cold air. He had a comical expression on his face, as if he had just eaten pigeon poop. He had tried his best to rush forward, but all his efforts had been in vain. He might as well have just walked for a while. Didn't the Divine King and the others say these things? Thinking of this, Yin Nuashing helplessly turned his head and looked at Yao Hua and the others. Seeing his somewhat bitter gaze, Jin Ying and the others smiled bitterly and said with resentment, "The Divine King and the others said, 'Everything depends on yourself. We won't provide you with any help. It's already good enough that we gave you some information. Why are you still blindly complaining?'" Hearing this, Yin Nuashing directly spat out a mouthful of water. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. This was really infuriating. Others received the information directly, but they had to fumble around on their own. Seeing everyone's liver-colored faces, Qin Yin looked at them curiously for a while. She couldn't help but smile. Speaking of which, what's that guiding bead? After smiling bitterly for a while, Yin Nuashing composed himself and looked at Qin Yin. That scarred guy kept mentioning the guiding bead, which made him very curious. Hearing him mention this, Qin Yin, who had just smiled, fell silent again. Mei Mao looked to the side with a troubled expression. Seeing her like this, Yin Nuashing scratched his head and smiled. "Don't say it if you don't want to. I was just asking out of curiosity. It's nothing." Hearing this, Qin Yin looked at him gratefully and nodded. However, there was still a trace of hesitation on her face, as if she was struggling with something. "Just keep going straight from here. There's no need to follow the river. With the light element, we'll reach it very quickly," Qin Yin said softly as she stroked her long hair and pointed forward. Yin Nuashing nodded. He glanced at the river on the left, then looked at the direction she was pointing and decisively changed their route. With someone guiding them, it should be much faster. We're already close to the Night God Mountain. The flow of energy is very clear. It shouldn't be long before we reach the foot of the Night God Mountain, Qin Yin said. But entering the Night God Mountain doesn't mean it's safe. The Night God Mountain is thousands of miles high, and the peak is hidden in fog all year round. Even if we're close to it, we might not be able to touch it. And the Night God Spring is at the peak of the Night God Mountain. Qin Yin blinked and looked at Yin Nuashing, who had stepped back a little in order to listen. Seeing him crossing his arms, she couldn't help but laugh. "Can't touch it?" Yin Nuashing was stunned and turned his head. "A barrier?" Shui Xia raised her head and looked at him. She said indifferently, "As soon as we came in, I felt that there was an extremely huge barrier that was constantly expanding. It mobilized the energy of the entire Eternal Night Forest." Yin Nuashing still couldn't get used to Shui Xia's unique speaking speed. However, what surprised him was that Shui Xia rarely spoke. Since even she had spoken, perhaps this barrier was really terrifying to a certain extent. Moreover, it said that the magical beasts on the Night God Mountain are all demigod-level magical beasts. There seems to be a magical beast race among them. However, no one knows where the Night God Mountain is. Qin Yin said with a bitter smile. Since they've appeared once, they should at least be able to remember the location, right? Could it be that the location of this mountain changes every 1,000 years? Or has no one ever found it before? Yin Nuashing rolled his eyes when he heard this. The location of the Night God Mountain changes every 1,000 years. Just like the Eternal Night Forest, it opens once every 1,000 years. The enormous energy of the eternal night forest is enough to maintain the activation of the barrier. Unless someone can break it, you won't even feel anything when you pass through the Night God Mountain. Qin Yan's pretty face turned serious when she finished speaking. That's really difficult. Yin Nuoxing and the others rolled their eyes when they heard this. Wasn't she deliberately making things difficult for them? As everyone spoke, the dark fog around them unknowingly thinned. Yaohua also requested to rest for a while. Yin Nuoxing also took this opportunity to have a good rest. Taking advantage of Yin Nuoxing's recovery, Qin Yin was able to clearly sense the capacity of Yin Nuoxing's body. She opened and closed her mouth a few times in astonishment, as if she wanted to say something, but could only give a wry smile. After completely recovering, everyone continued on their way. Before they knew it, the rows of towering ancient trees around them were suddenly cut off. A vertical cliff hundreds of feet high appeared in front of them. There were even a few saplings that extended outwards from the cliff. We've arrived at the Night God Mountain. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.